es para parte de esfuerzo e iniciativa para nos por de verdade tá hopi mais efetivo na chega na e fundo nan que tem available não somente na Aruba, na Curaçao, pero também na Holanda, na Europa. Nós está agradecidos mais a vossa presença. Meu nome está Agent Miller. Quizás vocês não estão mirando também via Zoom. Nós está live streaming via Zoom. Se você presente aqui dentro e você sabe gente que quizás lo no bem e que está desejando de WAC e live stream, manda a mim mensagem via WhatsApp 569-5442. Então eu mandava o link ou me por forward para a pessoa ou com me acaba de papia. Cultura Foundation é uma fundação que foi fundada no ano 2017 com o propósito de por empoderar especialmente nos artistas, nos criativos, nos local para por dar mais auge, mais plataforma e isso é o perfil de indústria cultural e criativo, que é um tópico relativamente novo para Aruba, pero não novo para vários países ao do mundo. Nós queremos que a indústria aqui tenha potencial não somente para desenvolvimento econômico, mas também desenvolvimento social de nossa isla, desenvolvimento cultural. Obviamente, vindo fora do sector, como artista, nós estamos convencidos que nossa isla merece de seguir expondo iniciativa positiva, iniciativa importante. Nos gente não merece de haya a oportunidade para a criatividade guardo desenvolver. Nesse processo aqui de empoderar esse sector, nós também continuamente busca informação, busca com nós por crescer, com nós também porta exitoso, pero nós não quer fazer nós só. Nós temos pensamento que riba isla, nós não tem milhares de outras islas. A ideia está para nós por colaborar com outro, para nós por trabalhar junto e durante o processo aqui para nós por motivar, inspirar e plantar essa semilla em mente de hopi gente que quizás artista não, criativo não, pero também organização cultural, artístico, social, educacional por vir junto para efetuar e fazer realidade projeto que tem impacto não somente riba esnan que é parte do projeto, pero também impacto riba comunidade em sua totalidade. Me te queremos estar aqui dentro de acordo que tem hopi para fazer, tem hopi coisa positiva que nós está consciente, que nós por fazer e a maneira que quizás você vai a invitação é não somente para o criativo, o artista, a organização cultural, pero também organização social, educacional. Quizás é por dar a impressão que nós está enfocando solamente em BC AUE, pero conversando com os speakers de AUE, não estava a hopi dar conosco o processo, esqueleto de tipo de apresentação para poder chegar a fundo, também a mesma coisa eigenlijk para qualquer tipo de fundação que vou portar. E ojalá que no final do dia, algum de vocês que está parte de uma organização cultural, por link com uma organização social, uma organização educacional, pero pensa também não somente em Aruba, sino Aruba, Curaçao, Bonaire, Saba, Santo Estácio, Saint Martin. Teco agora aqui, a Go Cultura a efetuar vários projetos, não vai dar detalhes sobre isso, pero a intenção está para depois do workshop aqui, que é a Introduction to Grant Writing, dependendo do interesse e da demanda, nós lo seguimos apresentar tipo de workshop aqui para profundizar nos mais aún mais em essa aqui como dinang, pero manema bisa agora para seguir empower o sector, para seguir empower nos gente e para seguir trabalhar capacity building de nós ainda não está desejar esse. Tem algum quote que junto nos a preparar? Não está bem? Ok. All great achievements require time. A outra vai refletir que nós também pedimos a hobby viajar para tomar tempo para estudar, analisar, visitar o website da organização que nós lo vai para pedir para você por ler, adquirir mais conhecimento, expandir e desenvolver a sua habilidade de escrever hopi mais e também requerir tempo. Mas não somente tempo, sino hopi paixão de a palavra que você também põe riba vossa apresentação. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. Hope importante para não diz óbvios que bidem o projeto, que o projeto tá, pero maneba bisa para fazer com paixão e fazer com meaning. Esse também ressaltar também de como tinha fazer durante a apresentação de AUE. A propósito de taller de AUE, para nós por compartilhar com você alguns basics de grant writing. Pesnang ko nota muito familiar que com grant of que com grant writing, você lobe haya of informação e hope duidelijk awe voor die nos tres speaker nang nos ta measure awe wider need for grant writing, coaching and our workshops. Na final dia de awe você lobe receber documento para você por rate com awe abay esse está anônimo para sobra. Na princípio, nós pedimos para registrar, se não há a chance de registrar, me tinha documento para registrar, se você pode tomar, se caminha em pausa para poder registrar, para nós porque dá em contato se você deseja aí. Pero na final, nós temos survey, que nós vai parte para você, para nós por ter uma ideia com grande demanda, tá? Com grande interesse, tá? Se nós temos que seguir que workshop nang aqui, of nós, mas bisa survey tá anônimo, e óbvio para estimular mais networking entre NGO ng local e criativo nang. Dengue propaganda para AUE, não se põe que o evento de AUE está com honor. Esse está sobra, mas na final de dia nós está dando boa oportunidade se você está desejar de por conversar com outro e de por network com outro, para quizás essa aqui por spark alguma colaboração entre organizações nang. Estrutura de AUE, a mim tem a order of the day, porque me quer é muito importante para você ter uma ideia que que vai passar AUE. Não vai focar muito sobre a timeline, nós também por você porque da, segundo já a minha passega, nós também focus para você ter uma ideia que que vai passar. Me tá basic a introdução, você também vai a parte 1 de basics of grant writing. Depois de ser project plan activity. No speaker nando vai estimular você tiki para conversar com outro durante o rato aqui, quizás para compartilhar com outro o que você assim so far e compartilhar ideia nang que você por compartilhar com nang também. Para piano de compartilhar com nang se você tem pergunta, sinto você livre para fazer pergunta, pero se tem a ver com o tópico no momento, porque na final lo tem oportunidade para você fazer pergunta na nos panelistas nang. Esnan que tá online via Zoom, você também por fazer pergunta. Seja via Zoom session, ou você pode mandar a mim mensagem via WhatsApp na 569-5442. Nesse na Corsol, me quer você saco nos código na ruta 297. A mim tem pessoa que você comunicar com ele via Corsol, nos que mandam saludo para na Corsol, na Boneiro, na St. Martin, na Saba, na Station. Danke na você para a parte dessa aqui. Depois de sei, nós está a parte número 2 de Basics of Grant Writing. Já nós está break de ongeveer 30 minutos. Nós temos não somente bebida, mas nós temos algum sándwich, nós temos algum cookies, nós que tratamos o hobby bom como você tem dentro do meu workshop de AUE. E depois de sei, eu tenho a Q&A session, dus momento que você pode fazer pergunta, compartilhar ideia, compartilhar preocupação, e just do sor, da closure, para manema bisa, de do sor para honor se você deseja, você pode fazer networking. Você pode fazer pergunta, comunicar com outro, ou você pode caso também se você deseja. Hopefully not. Nos speaker nang di AUE, nós estamos começar com Thais Franken, que é lecturer e researcher na Universidade de Aruba. É Cultural and Creative Industry Consultant, aliado muito importante da Fundação Cultura, é parte da Fundação Cultura, que é de nós lecturer nang AUE. Também nós temos Gyonne Goedhoop, que também apresenta o workshop também AUE. É Community Connector, Cultural Consultant, programa-maker e podcaster. E também Tibisay Sankatsing Nava, que é researcher e é parte da adviescommissie de Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie. Dus é também um hobby valioso, para sobre é também por dar hobby tips, hobby valioso. Tour 3. Tem hobby experiência em grant writing e tour 3 tem hobby tips que não por compartilhar com você AUE e sem bisa muito mais, dia mais eu agradecer você para vossa presença, não me wax se me não olvida nada, sim, me tenho que agradecer, Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds, Caribisch gebied, Kuta hasi possível e live stream, para todos não que não portei presente, por toch wel atender e live stream aqui. Ik agradecer também New India Assurance, na O4, Rafi, me olvidei para trabalhar aqui que está para pé. O4IA Architectenbureau. Rafi, danke para o suporte. O que está para pé, by the way? O4, yeah. Na Subway também, sandwich não que você vai desfrutar mais lá. E na Team Films, e assim também sonang, mita introduzir o workshop de Awe Mainta, desfrutar, have an open mind, have an open heart, ask questions, every question está válido e hopefully echt nos pode inspirar e motivar você para junto conosco. Nos de verdade chega no fundo na que tá bilhões de euros que tem available. Bom, para nós isla não também, que tá chega na oportunidade para chegar no fundo na aqui. Alright? Disfrutar de dia. Malubida algo? Oh, not in sound. Zoom. Tá bom, mas quanto bisa meu ovo só.
Sim, me tá enviando messages com not in sound on Zoom.
Well, me querer toch para mim que posso começar é importante para não ter sound. Sobre a boa parte para não também tá, I think the most important part. Dia nang lo sige message mo bisa ba say? See?
Ting sounds? There is sound, so maybe it's Zoraida.
Okay.
Mijn computer traga.
Thank you, Zoomers. Okay, Zoraida, porta, I think hasi algo diferente. Ito bom. Ito bom. Sorry, Arthur. No, Arthur show accurato. All right, Shonang. Disfrutar de dia? No mas. Anto, nos na kumisa ku workshop. Thank you. By the way, a Q&A session na final, nos ting e microfono kinang, kupo suporwin para na je, e motivo ko nos tapon e microfono kinang, tapa noturhende por pape ding otro, pa noturhende por grito ding otro, nos deseape by an orderly fashion, pa nos wante central, ipesay tambe e microphone inang. All right? Thank you. Enjoy.
Okay. So from my end, I would like to welcome everyone. Language-wise, yeah. So we're going to do the presentation in English because we do have people from the other, the other islands, and I think it would be nice for them to be able to follow this presentation as well. I think we will be switching to Pavimento at some point because if I'm not mistaken, the majority of them are Pavimento speakers. But I do want to go over the structure that we are going to present during this presentation. That's exactly this. Yeah, so back one more. Yeah, so I think this is very important because I do want to give out a short disclaimer. This is introduction to grant writing. So we're not going to go in detail in writing styles, details as to how to effectively write a grant. We are giving you today the basics of what you need to know on how to apply for grant funding. The idea is that we will support all of you with more workshops and coaching when it comes to specifically writing styles, how to do product, how to make good goals, how to make good timelines, budgets, all of those kinds of workshops we will provide, but in more detail. So for today, I'm not sure what experience all of you have with grant writing up until this moment, but this is just the basics. Maybe, do you guys want to add something?
Mine works. No, I think that was everything.
And it's very informal, right? So we want
Exactly.
to talk to you guys and keep this engaging. And then afterwards, we will share some best practice tips and just general tips on how you can go about writing your grant effectively. And we will specifically focus on grants that are available in the Netherlands. Yes? I believe? Please, phones on silent. Yes. Introduce myself, Thais Franken. Yes, I am a lecturer at the University of Aruba. I have been advising different NGOs on their grant writing process. I also give this course at the UA. I am also a researcher at the university. I conduct many research projects within the Good Governance and Leadership Institute. But one of my biggest passions is the cultural sector, and I have dedicated many research projects and my time in this sector, and I do feel and I believe strongly that this sector can grow, and it has a lot of potential for the islands in general. So that is a bit about me. So for today, I think it's very important for us to explain what a grant is, because many times we notice that there is a miscommunication or misunderstanding as to what a grant really is, right? So what is a grant? Before we go to that, I think it's important to mention the different ways how NGOs can fund programs or fund projects in general. Yeah, we know that many of the NGOs on the island are funded by the government, so having a government subsidy does allow you to fund projects in one way or the other. We know that this funding type is decreasing over time, so now the pressure is on to find extra sources of income to be able to fund your project. You have donations and sponsorships, and I think this is something very popular. Many organizations are used to requesting donations and sponsorships. Fundraising events, likewise, very popular as well, to raise funds to do certain types of projects. Sales, we also have some organizations that sell a product. Maybe they sell shirts or merchandise, or they have a social enterprise attached to their organization that provides some kind of income to fund further projects. Crowdfunding, this is not popular on the island, but it is growing. We have seen numerous examples of this. I think SEDE is one of them that did a project that's related to this type of funding mechanism. And this is basically where the crowd basically donates their money on a larger scheme. But internationally, crowdfunding is very popular. You have different online platforms that offer this, but on the island, this is not as used as it could be. Yes? And then grant funding. So this is specifically another approach how organizations can apply for funding, to receive funding. And I'm going to explain a bit more what grant funding is about. So what is a grant? Many times I talk to people and they're like, yeah, but kiko tong grant call. Yeah, if it's not a new concept, but I think for us on the islands, it is a new movement that more and more organizations are applying for grants internationally, especially. So we do have local grant agencies. UNOCA is a good example of that, but there are more organizations that you can apply for a grant. So a grant is a fund given by an entity. And what do we mean with entity? Yeah, it's often a public body or a separate foundation that has the goal of investing, funding money into the social sector or the cultural sector or sports or the environment. So you have different funding agencies that have different goals in where they want to invest the money. Many times this money is public money. So it's the government subsidizes a funding agency, and the agency has the job to kind of invest the money in the organizations that need it in a very structured way. Many times I also think that people assume that a fund or a grant should be paid back in one way or the other, and this is false. So a grant is not like a loan, right? So you're not committed to pay the grant back. So you receive the grant and you use the grant specifically towards the project that you apply to. And you're not expected to pay or reimburse that money back. So let's make some concepts clear. Okay, so the process of writing a proposal, an aanvraag, for funding has come to be known as grant writing. So that process of writing a proposal is what we mean with grant writing. And the individuals responsible for that writing is a grant writer. So most of you will become the grant writer. So you are in charge of writing a proposal, coming up with all of the segments in a proposal that is requested from the funder. The entity providing the money is the funder. Yeah, so the agency is the funding agency. While it's commonly said that one writes a proposal to obtain a grant, it may be at the end it will result in a specific contract. This does not happen often, but sometimes you have separate entities that prefer to create a binding contract in order to receive the funding, but this doesn't happen often. Yeah, so there is a difference. It's very important to mention that these grants and contracts are available to fund all sectors. So you have to be very mindful to seek for the funder that is specifically working towards your sector. So if you're in the social sector or the cultural sector or creative sector or sports, you should look for specific funding agencies that fund that kind of projects. Many times we encounter people that hand in proposals to funding agencies that are not even related to their topic. And they get discouraged because they get a big no. But it's not because your project is not good. It's that you're applying to the wrong funder. You're applying to the wrong grant agency. So public and private, you do have agencies that are private, so don't receive money from the government, but are completely private in their in how they retain the money and how they invest the money back. Yeah, and these public funds are available through local, regional, international, and global levels, right? So I just mentioned a good example about, or a good example of a local funder, UNOCA, but you do have other organizations or funding agencies regionally, internationally, and globally, and we will touch base on those kinds of funding agencies in a bit. So yeah, that's it. So what is a grant call? So most, I would say all grant agencies have a website. How many of you have visited one of these websites? Okay, not all of you. So this is already a good tip. Please visit the websites of the funding agencies. Usually this is where, usually this is where they release the call, the grant call. Yeah, and the grant call can be named different ways. A call for proposal, a call for request. So there are different ways how they call the grant call. And usually it's a flyer or it's a page on the website where they explain the specific grant that they have open and what you need to apply. So there are different types of information that you will find on the website or the specific flyer or in the newspaper or wherever you find the grant. It will always indicate what type of funding it is. Yes? What type? Is it to fund a project? Is it to fund costs related to production? Yeah? So there are different funding streams, different types of funding. And they will be very specific as to what kind of funding they are that they are providing. The target population. So maybe they're saying, okay, this is only for ZZP'ers, or this is only for for stichtingen. Yeah, so you have to be very careful to find out who the target is of this specific grant. The topics, right? So if they say this is for heritage, the funding stream is only for heritage, so you can't apply for anything that is not heritage related. So be careful in looking at what the topic is about. Who is eligible? Who is allowed to receive the funding? And many times you have organizations that know that they're not eligible and they still try to apply. But don't do this, because these funding agencies are very strict when it comes to evaluating if you fit this description. The amount of funding, this can vary. This can vary locally up to internationally. Sometimes a grant can be for 2,000 florins, and sometimes if you go further into the Netherlands or even EU, it can reach 40,000 euros. So it completely depends where you're applying, what kind of call you are looking at. The source of funding and the goals. The funder will always be very explicit to what their goals are, what their general goals are, and this is very important for you to know, because this is information that you will have to use to convince the funder that you fit in the spoor or that you fit in their goal. The format, they will give you information as to the format of the grant proposal. Many agencies nowadays have a platform on their website. So you have main fonds, this is specifically for the Dutch agencies, where you have to apply online. However, most of the time you still have to upload your own proposal, so a documentation that has details in regards to your own proposal. So they will give you exact information about the spacing, the font, how many words you have to use, the language, right? And all the documents that need to be attached to the appendix, and documentation that has to be attached can be your KVK, it can be your yearly statement, jaarverslag, those kinds of documentation that will help the organization to get a better look of who you are and how many years you have been existing, etc. You will also sometimes get a description of the reviewing process, and this information is always available on the website. You will know how they will evaluate you and what criteria they use to do that. The due date, this is very important because many organizations miss the due date and then they reach half an hour prior to the deadline being closed, and then they get mad because the website isn't working, their account isn't working, they don't have the password right, it's blocked, or internet akay, right? So don't miss the due date. Nos saco nos hope bihata laat, pero ito un mal costumbre. So be mindful of the due date and always hand in a couple of days prior to the due date, because you will have enough time to contact the agency back if your account isn't working or if it's not working properly. And many links as to best practices and example forms and documents that you should download, guidelines. Many organizations don't read these guidelines, and they are available on the website. Okay? So the grant application cycle, and this is very straightforward, and I think it's important for many of you to understand this cycle and to understand why it's a cycle, right? And why all steps are important. It's important to follow through on all of these steps and not skip them, even though sometimes we want to skip steps because it's quicker, but it's important that we adhere to all of these stages. So the first stage is you as an organization, you are going to focus on the need. What do you want to solve? What is your project about? What is the focus, the scope of your project? Is your project only impacting a couple of people or groups of people or the entire community? Micro, meso, macro. What level of project are we talking about? Then once you know what your project is about, you have to find a funder. You have to find an agency that fits your project, that fits your goals and fits the type of activities that you want to get funded. Then you study the call, so the request for proposal. You study the call, you study all of the elements that I just described, you study the components of the call, who's eligible, how much money, the due date, all of the requirements. You have to read through those documentations carefully. No perde tempo ta apply si call no ta pabo, si no ta fit bo proposal. Find another call. Write your proposal. So this is specifically where you're going to start writing. At this point, you have downloaded all your documentation. You have downloaded the exact forms that you need to hand in to the agency. And you know that you have to develop the project objective or the project goals, the timeline, the budget, all of those components. This is the stage where you are writing out your proposal. This stage can take anywhere up to 2 weeks to 6 months. Yes? So it depends who you are applying to and how big your project is. Some organizations start 1 year prior to the call just to have enough time to write a proposal. And other organizations have a proposal ready, but they're just waiting for the right call to open to just submit. So it really depends on the person who's writing and how fast they can write a specific grant proposal, which will determine how long the writing of a proposal will last. Then you submit your proposal. Many organizations require you to hand in online. So you have your account, you have your email, your password, you log in, you submit, and then you wait for the results of your application. And this is especially when you're applying to funding agencies that are not locally based. Yeah? Then the assessment of your proposal. Here, the funding agency will take your proposal, and there are advice commissions, there are evaluators. Yung grupo de gente tabi lesa bo proposal. There's a group of people that are going to evaluate your proposal. So many times, or you have to at least be aware that there is a process in place how they assess your proposal. And I think later on we will we can touch base on that. Once the deadline is there, you will receive an answer. So the assessment results are presented to you. You will receive feedback, either a yes or no, and why. Then if you get a yes, hopefully we are excited, we're going for more yeses, you can start the implementation phase of your project. And this can be anywhere between 1 month to a year. It depends on the type of project that you have handed in. And then the final stage is to report back. Not all agencies require you to report back to them what happened during the project. But some organizations do require this step. So it is important for you to be aware that some may require you to hand in a report at the end or give a newspaper release or have 24 horas come and just give a release from what happened and just a summary of what happened during that day or in the implementation phase of your project. But not all of them require this step. Yes.
Hi, bom dia. Los Stacy? See, all right. I'm going to talk a bit more about who the funding agencies are. Before I start, I'm Gyonne Goedhoop, born and raised in Aruba. What? Yeah. Okay. And I work at the moment in the Netherlands with different funds. I am a ZZP'er in that sense, and they hire me to check out, like they call it the bureau adviseur. So I am the one who gets some of the plans before they go to the committee, what Thais kind of touched upon, and I think Tibisay will talk a bit more later on about. So I have seen a lot, and I will come back to that at the end with the best practices and tips. But before we get to that part, we wanted to touch a bit about like the funding agencies, because all of these terms may sound familiar or they may not, but we want to get a bit more practical with that. Like we said, there are different levels of funding, and my, in that sense, specialty is more the Dutch-based funding agencies. We have the Fonds Podiumkunsten, Stimuleringsfonds, Mondriaanfonds, Filmfonds, Nederlands Letterenfonds, and Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie. I will touch a bit upon them, and these are, in that sense, the Rijksfondsen, and they are funded with the money of the people, you could say, the belastingbetalers. And actually the names already kind of pinpoint to what they fund. And they are pretty big funds. These are what Thais also said, public funds, with different grant calls, and in Dutch you call them, regelingen. And they have deadlines and they open at a certain point, and that is why it's really good that Thais also said that always check the website or have someone helping you to check the website to check the deadline. I put some of the names of the people that are, in that sense, what I could find, because I don't know all of them either. It's a very big field. In charge, you could say, for the applications from the ABC SSS Islands in the Caribbean. And what I would propose always is to, I will get back to that at the end, is to always call or email them before you apply or start reading even. So if you have these names, and I think, but I'm looking at Arthur for that, I don't know how people will get the presentation, but you can write down the names now or check them later, and then just go Google.
I think we will share the presentation,
Yeah.
right?
I think we will share the presentation.
No
Yeah.
worry, por saca potret, pero no se va a mandar también. We will share it also with the people online.
Exactly.
And you can always, and I always suggest that. So you have these names and you just say like, hey, I wanna, even before, if you know what you wanna do and you just have a very broad idea of what you want to do, but you think, I'm doing something with theater, Fonds Podiumkunsten, that is theater. You could call and you could ask for, in this sense, Dana Kibbelaar. You say, I'm from Aruba, I'm doing this. Can I talk to you? Which regeling past? I'm talking 3 languages. I'm sorry, but that is how my mind works. And that's how you go. You just get familiar with it. But I will get more into that a bit later on.
And I think it's important for us to know that these are specifically cultural agencies.
Yes.
There are other social agencies that exist. But I think if we start listing all of the sectors, then we will be here till tomorrow.
And I think also it's important to mention that I'm saying this very voorzichtig in that sense, because all of these different funds are going through a, in that sense, transition in the type of grant calls and dus regelingen, and also crossover. And what I mean is that they're not just cultureel, but also educatief.
Yes.
Or they're niet alleen mediaal, but also in that sense.
Sociaal.
Yeah. Dus say, I'm always like, just call the people before you even start, actually. I would always advise that. Because it also gives you a connection with the funds, and that you're not just talking or sending something to a computer. So these are the Dutch-based funding agencies that are public. In that sense, also like, the regional, in that sense, they are also the same now because they really opened up themselves for the ABC SSS Islands. I will get more into that whole construct later on at the end. But a lot of shifts have been happening. The reason why we're also doing this is because the funds in the Netherlands have been talking a lot about, okay, how can we reach the ABC SSS Islands more, seeing that we're also part of that connection. And these are the same names in that sense.
And the fact that not a lot of us are applying.
Yeah, and
So
there's a
they're
reason
also
for that.
shocked as to why don't the islands apply, since they are also able to apply. So
Yeah, and you may have heard as well. Yeah, and I think that's something that they're trying to work on. You may have heard of the pilot with Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds Caribisch Gebied. That's a part of it, but all the funds are doing different pilots and trying to be more accessible. And that is both in the calls and how they communicate, but also in the requirements for the ABC SSS Islands.
And I wanted...
Poco poco, hopefully.
There's a screenshot that I will be sharing at the end, or that we will be sharing about that samenwerking that Tibisay is talking about. And it's also very important to know that the reason that they've started to work together is because they want to reach out more in that sense, and that Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds Caribisch Gebied is there to also facilitate that opening of the connection, you could say. But that I talked to some of the people from these funds, you can also just call them directly. You can email them, you can call them directly as well. And then what Thais already mentioned, we also have local funding agencies and UNOCO, which all of us really, I think, would know. And something that I would also like to emphasize is that we also have possibilities. These are the two that we wanted to highlight, the European funding agencies. The ones I have a lot of contact with is Erasmus+. And I think that is very interesting for people here to know, because Erasmus+ funds, it's a European fund, but it funds actually all projects that relate to working with young people and exchanging of information between young people. So that is very broad, and you're like, okay, what is that? But that is how broad that is. So let's say the young people in Aruba want to collaborate with some young people in the Netherlands, and it can be actually any subject that is socially or culturally applicable. It can be historical, it can be anything, but the doel is for the exchange of information, and that's where you can go for Erasmus+. So you can think of many projects that we are already doing in Aruba with a lot of young people already exchanging information, and if you have ideas of working maybe internationally, that could be a very good fund for that. And Willemijn, I talked to her, I told her that I was dispersing information about the fund, and she's like, yes, please, because people don't know where to find us. That's another story. But yeah, so just feel free. You can call them. They're erasmusplus.com, I think. And then you can find the information
it's
on that.
also very important that the Erasmus Plus goes so far that even if you are working for a cultural organization and you are a coordinator or a director and you want experience, for example, in Spain, you link up with an NGO in Spain. The coordinator in Spain comes to Aruba and you go to Spain and you exchange, and then you stay there for 2-3 months and you learn about how that organization works and the culture, etc. And then you come back and you bring that information to the island. So it's also for older people, not only younger, but it depends in what framework you are presenting your proposal. And it's also very important for the international...
Oh, no, I changed it because I wanted to get back to
the
it.
international, the EU funding. There is a Horizon project. And if I'm not mistaken, our Minister of Economic Affairs also gave a public lecture on the new options that the Horizon Project or the EU Horizon Project offers for the creative and cultural sector. This is also very important, especially if you're catering more towards research-based project or bigger scale projects on the island. These funding streams go up to 50,000 euros, 125,000 euros. So we're talking about big money. Yes, and the OCTs, so the small islands that pertain to the European Union, Aruba is one of those islands, are able to apply for this kind of funding, and we are not applying. Yeah, so I think there is also a big initiative from the local government to kind of encourage and stimulate more organization, especially if you are focused on research. There is a lot of money available to apply for this kind or this level of funding.
Oh, I wanted to get a little bit more not in that sense in depth, but give some examples. Like Fonds Podiumkunst, I think is a fund that can be very applicable to Aruba. Or the ABCSSS Islands at large, in the way that we do theater or that we do anything that considers a stage. You have so many different calls and regelingen, like they say in Dutch, where we could apply for and check out. And a lot of what I know about Fonds Podiumkunsten, I worked with them for 3 years. They are very much focused on what I said, the crossover. So not just like theater, but combining it with, I don't know, spoken word or with a movie or with a CD. So music, everything combining together. Stimuleringsfonds Creatieve Industrie, a lot of people don't know even in the Netherlands about that, but it's specifically for people who are in the broadest sense the creative industry, but also very much media based and beeldende kunst as well. Sometimes they focus on, so I would really check that out if you're like a graphic designer or if you make things graphically. Creative industry would be a very good one for that. And I think even, I'm gonna say this very voorzichtig, but they have a call right now open where also people from the ABC SSS Islands can apply through a scout. It's called, like they put like matchmakers. You can talk to the matchmakers. They are in the Netherlands, but they are very open to talking also with the people on the ABC SSS Islands to see what the possibilities are, and the application process is a bit different and more low-key, which is always nice. So I would check that out on the website. Mondrian Fonds is a very broad fund for all things artistic. I think or a lot of people in Aruba that in ieder geval I know Mondrian Fonds. So check that website out as well if you...
Maybe I can add something. So the Mondrian Fonds is currently preparing a call, which they gave me permission to talk about very briefly. It's not published yet, but next month they're having an info session for a call about ABC SSS heritage. So all organizations in Aruba and on the ABC SSS Islands can apply, and that call is specifically for us. So keep an eye out if you're working in heritage and culture on one of the 6 islands, because that is coming up. The session is going to be online, and this call is also a type of pilot to understand how Mondrian Fonds can be more approachable and can adapt its process to fit closer to the applicants on the islands. So this, if you're in culture or heritage, this is a very good session. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways. Of course, we have the informatieloket, or the pilot that we're doing with Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds with all the Rijksfonds, and I think there's a lot of information there. I'm not sure in what way that information will be shared through Prins Bernhard, but I'm sure that they will share it. But also, all of these funds have
newsletters.
Websites.
Yes, they
Websites,
have
newsletters. Yeah, even also if you're on Facebook, that's also a way to follow them. But if you are working in one of these fields, it's very helpful to register for their newsletter of the particular funds that is useful for you.
Yes, because then every week you will get an email and you have an overview of all of the calls that they have, and you can, I mean, it's very important to almost stalk these organizations, right? So, like, keep looking at their social media, go to their website continuously, but calls na kita habri isera lihe. And it's a very tight game. So, don't think because it says, okay, the call is open for 6 months, wait the entire 6 months, and at the end, you are starting to apply. Take the initiative immediately to start the process of applying.
Yeah, and the number 4 and 5 are honestly funds that I don't have a lot of experience in, but I know they are very, I don't know the word in another language, streng. In that sense, even for people in the Netherlands to get money and funding for like a big movie or letter of funds. Yeah, that's a tiki tai. Manina to bisa ding Hollandes pahaya plaka ainang. So I personally don't have experience with them, but those are the names that I found that are in charge for also the dispersion of information to the Caribbean. So you can always call them if you feel guided to for your project. And do you want to talk a bit about Fonds Cultuurparticipatie, Tibi?
Yes, sure. portanos bahala un tiki, pues me te quieren nos nota ding is Zoom camera
Sim.
mas ma
Oh,
comprende.
sorry.
I know.
Sorry about that. Yes, so Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie is really about participation in culture, active participation in culture, often producing, so being a maker in culture, but they also have projects on education, but it's really about encouraging cultural participation at all levels. And my role, so I work with Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie, so that's why I know a bit more about how that funds works. But they are very keen on funding more projects in the ABC SSS Islands. In fact, all of these Dutch-based funds are Vandaar, that collaboration also with Prins Bernhard Cultura Fonds Caribisch Gebied. And I think what's really good that what we have here is these names. These names are the people who have the portfolio of the Caribbean. So it's also part of their job to facilitate you being successful. And that is something that we should take advantage of because their job is done better if they succeed, and then, so they're there to help. So it's very important to really talk to them, what Gyonne already said.
Yes, I will get back to that in a bit more at the tips and tricks, and we'll get into that. But first, because we already had those slides, we have this slide.
Right, yes. So I'm Tibisay. As Ajahn already introduced me briefly, I am a researcher at a research institute in the Netherlands called the KITLV, Koninklijk Instituut voor Taal, Land en Volkenkunde. I'm working on a research project about climate change adaptation on the ABC SSS Islands. I'm also doing my own PhD research. And what I just said, I am an advisor, adviescommissielid voor Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie. And what that means is when the proposals come in, they go through a person at the fonds who writes an analysis of it. And that analysis, exactly, that's what Gyonne does. She writes an analysis for not Cultuurparticipatie, but another fund. And after that, the proposal and the analysis come to the committee, which is usually me and maybe 3 to 6 other people, depending on the call. And we read it. And we evaluate it based on the requirements of the funder. And we say, this suits the requirements, this doesn't. It gets a certain ranking depending on how the call works. And then projects get funded or not. So that's my role. And so I'll be talking also from that experience. And I'll be talking from my personal experience evaluating grants. I've also written grants. But just so you know where that's coming from.
Before you go, I wanted to mention very briefly, which is information that's important to everyone looking and here, is that when you talk to the people whose names are on the list, they are not the people who they call honoreer the grant. So people like me, and what Tibisay just mentioned, we get it, we write a report, and then a commission who is onafhankelijk in that sense, they say if you get the grant or not by the voorwaarden that the fund has for that. So that is kind of how that setup works. It's important to know as well.
Yes, exactly. And that's helpful because that person who you speak to can support you in writing a grant, that a proposal that fits what they're looking for. And they're not going to evaluate it, but they are closely involved in the process. And in some cases, they can explain something to the committee. So if they understand your project and you've spoken to them, it might be easier for them to also put in a good word if they have the answer to the questions of the committee. Okay, so I'm going to stand up, if that's okay. Been sitting for a while. So let's try to get this a bit more practical. Can I ask, who here has an idea for a project they would like to get funded?
Oh, wow.
That's about half of the room that I can see in here, so you have an idea. Who, I believe? Well, I mean, okay, so let's assume, I saw about 50% hands, but maybe it's a bit more. Everybody has an idea, and we want to get this funded. Now, the funders, maybe we can go to the next slide. The funders have an agenda. They have priorities. Like Thais and Gyonne already said, they all have something that is important to them. Basically, they have a problem that has been defined by whoever is making the policy for this fund. It can be the government, it can be the people working at the funds, but there's a problem that has been defined. Like with Cultuurparticipatie, not everybody has access to participation in culture. And that is something we want to fix. So the fund has this money. But they're not going to fix it. So they're saying, hello everyone in Aruba, Bonaire, Curaçao, St. Martin, Sebastian. We have this problem. Not everybody in Curaçao participates in culture. How can we fix this? That's up to you as the proposal writer to fix. So you have to be very specific in how can your personal goals, that idea that you just thought about when I asked, how does that fit with what the funder wants? So you see this little diagram. Purple is what you want to do, yellow is what the funder wants you to do, and that part in the middle is what you're looking for. If there's no overlap, it's not worth it, because it's not going to work for you. You're going to be doing something that you don't want to do or you don't have the expertise to do, and for the funder, it also doesn't make any sense. Can you just go back for one second? And this little section in the middle also means that those ideas that you have right now already, they may be great ideas, but they might not fit with these policies. And that means sometimes redirecting the kinds of things you want to do if you want to apply for a fund. But what's also possible is that, for example, Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie works on participation. And you work in culture, but you haven't thought about participation so much yet. But you see a call that they have that could be interesting for you. This is also an opportunity for you to think, okay, so how can I, in my organization that does performances with professionals, how could I expand to participatie with people who are not professionals in this cultural field, for example? So that's really, you can approach this from both ways. You can start with your idea and see where it fits, but you can also start with your expertise and see what the calls are looking for. And I think in this it's just important to be genuine. Be honest to yourself and to the funder, is this a fit or not? And then you can create something really interesting. And I find that sometimes these calls also can give you ideas about how you can approach the topics that you're working in. And it can be very inspiring and creative as well. Next one, please. Okay, so we figured out that overlap, that little yellow-purple overlap. We have the right funder. Thais already went over these details, so I'm not going to go too deep, but what do? You read the calls carefully. You see exactly what they're looking for. Yes, you talk to them, but I'll get to that in a second. You make sure you're eligible. You make an online account, and you check the timeline and the deadline. Very important. So not all funds, but many funds work with a first-come, first-served process. So the call opens on... the 1st of March. Yeah. It opens on the 1st of March, it ends at the end of April. I don't know how you work, but I like to look up the deadlines. That's just, I need the pressure to write. But with Cultuurparticipatie, for example, that's usually not a good idea, because they will have 1 million euros to spend in that month and a half or 2 months that the call is open. And they start at the beginning. The first person to submit gets evaluated. If it's bad, it doesn't suit, it gets rejected. But if it's good, it gets funded. And they hear it right away, most of the time. That means that after a month, maybe there were already so many good proposals that the money's finished. And so if you were waiting for that last day of the deadline, which is what I often like to do, you don't get a chance.
Because it's closed.
Bonotani Subi waiting list, it's closed. So it is really helpful to start early. This is not always the case, but it's a good tip to keep in mind because it does happen. I've been on committees where halfway through we had to stop evaluating and say, sorry, all of you people who spent all of this time, we've already reached the maximum.
There is an example I will be giving with a screenshot at the end, because most of the time they will say, in Dutch then, er is maximaal 60.000 euro hiervoor beschikbaar. And if they have that, then you know that it's this case.
I'm hopping out of the screen again. Agent bisami, mi pohala, of mi para otro banda porta. Yes. Next one, please. Okay, so we've said this about 20 times already, but the first step before you start writing, unless you have your own project plan already ready that you want to adapt, of course, that's also a possibility, but before you start thinking about applying, talk to the funder. Again, these contact names that we had on the first slide, they want you to succeed. I've been on many committees and you always open a plan and you don't think, oh, this is going to be terrible. You think, oh, I hope this is going to be great and I'm going to be so happy to read this and I'm going to be excited and we have a project to fund. That's how the committee sees it. So these funders are there also to help you connect. and help you frame things in the correct way. So call, email, text, talk to them, talk to the dedicated person for the ABC SSS Islands, check the funders how to apply videos. They all have a how do you apply step-by-step video, often in Dutch for the Dutch funds, but also sometimes in English. And what I said, each funding agency has specific goals, types of projects, types of forms, timelines. We've said this a couple of times. It's very specific. It's very rare that project proposal that you already have, that you can just send it in and it'll be successful. It's highly unlikely because it's just not targeted and that won't work. Then, still before you start, do it together. More and more we see that the funders require collaboration. So it's not just my organization of Tibisay is gonna start doing, what do I say, something outrageous, all the music teaching in Aruba. And from today, I'm the music person. No, then the fund is gonna ask me, okay, but who else is working in the field in Aruba? And the committee doesn't know Aruba as well as, and I'm speaking for the Dutch funds, as well as they know Rotterdam, for example. So it's also our responsibility to explain, okay, in Aruba we have all of these organizations working in music. I am one of them, I collaborate with them or not, and then why not? So really position yourself in a community, and that means also while you're writing and preparing your proposal, talk to these people. They might be your friends, they might be your competitors, but it's really important to focus on collaboration rather than competition, because that's what the cultural sector funding and the social sector funding are both really emphasizing more and more.
Yeah, and I also think this is also a requirement from the funds, seeing that there are so many NGOs working on the same topic. And this is not an uncommon thing on the island. We are together in an NGO, NGO. And in like 5 to 10 years, you have 10 organizations working for the same objective. And when applying, these Dutch funds are like, huh, competing DS dance, whatever, mesmo objective, and the island has 110,000 people. How is that possible? So they are also starting to require for funds to apply together.
Yeah.
You are more successful applying for a fund if you can prove that, okay, we are doing this, I am doing this project with X, Y, and Z group. We will target a larger audience. And they are all for a larger audience instead of only focusing on that fragmentation. They want to encourage more unity in the entire sector instead of keep encouraging the fragmentation and keeping smaller islands on an island, right? So that's the mentality.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more popular. Hopi biyahe ba tabi parako na tabi verwag partnership, or it's even listed. They are requiring you to at least explain who's your partner in this call.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it really does help if you can sketch. Well, we'll get to that. So yes, point number 2, find partners. Then number 3, depending on your project, not all projects really have a target audience, but if you have people you are going to involve in your project that are not writing it with you, so let's say the children that will take your, back to the music example, your music classes, or the people who will be doing the volunteer work. Sit with them as well and talk to them. Talk to your target audience. Because then you can also write in your proposal, I've spoken to the target audience and this is what they need. And it'll just make your proposal so much better. So find common ground, both with your colleagues, competitors within your sector, but also maybe outside of your sector, across sectors, and with your target audience, with your participants.
Yeah, and that is also very important because nowadays they are also looking for partnerships in between numerous sectors. So maybe a cultural sector partners with a social sector. Zorg, yeah, zorg en welzijn. So that cross-sectoral collaboration is also becoming more popular.
Yeah. Yes, please. You can already hear my examples are really from the Rijksfondsen because that's where I have the most experience. We have a lot of people in this room who have experience with other funds. We also have people from the other funds here, like UNOCA, and then online also Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds. And those are different expertises, but what I'm going to try to do in this section is to try to set the basics of how we think about writing our project plan. And that then needs to be adapted to all of these procedures and all of these different, different funders. Next one, please. So you figured out all the logistics, you've picked the right funder, you've been in touch with them, you have your ideas already, you're ready to start writing, putting on paper your project plan. This is usually required. There are some calls that have a different format where you can pitch your project, where you can send in a video, but there's usually some form of a summary at least that you need to send in written. So when you're preparing a project plan, I'm going to go very in detail to each of these points, but I'll go very quickly first. What are you describing in your project plan? First, what is the challenge or the problem? What is your goal? Who is the target group? How are you doing it? Very concretely, step by step. How are you going to achieve your goal? Who are you doing this with? Your partnerships? How will you evaluate? How will you share the results? And what happens after the money runs out? Because people want to invest. So they don't want you to just do the project most of the time and then it's over and it's done and everybody forgets about it. They want something to come out of it. So also think about the long term. Throughout the next examples, I will keep saying this. Oraboskibi, when you're writing, be specific, be clear, use concise language and use examples. So it's very, very clear what is going to happen. It's nice to use ambitious keywords and things like this, but in the end, what's going to make your project successful is to be very specific. And this is exactly what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, and this is what will come out of it. Next one, please. Okay, the next couple of slides, I will introduce a little bit how to start writing your project proposal. Then we will have a short intermission in which you will think about that idea that everybody has and try to formulate it a little bit for yourself, with your neighbor perhaps that you're sitting next to. So you can also start thinking about how to formulate your project plan for your idea following these steps. So first, what is the challenge? What is the problem? Give a situation sketch. I say, well, we have noticed that in Aruba, people do not get to the funds in the Netherlands for cultural or social projects. That is the problem. There's not enough money. Let me tell you about how many fantastic creatives we have that are very motivated and very creative and produce fantastic things, but they get demotivated because the money doesn't come in. That is a problem that I'm sketching now. And that will introduce, they'll get the committee to be like, oh yeah, that's not nice. That's an annoying problem. That's easy to solve. So, well, Mr. Monet, draw them in. There's a real problem that you as a fund are perfectly positioned to solve by giving me the grant to do it. That's what you're trying to say, right? Okay, so we sketch the situation. What is going on? Then, specifically for us, ABC SSS Islands, it's very important to say where we're based. Describe the island, the existing infrastructures and organizations that are active in your corner. Like I said, in the Netherlands, there may be 100 massive dance schools with all the equipment that is required. Here, that might be different. And so the types of things that you will ask for in the grant are different things, because you might ask, for example, for some expensive equipment that in the Netherlands people would be like, no, come on, the theater or the dance school should already have that, so we won't fund it. But if you explain the situation, then it makes more sense to the funder, okay, yeah, I get why they would need that.
Yeah.
So explique, I really explain the situation that you're in and the partners.
And the context. Because
the context.
I mean, sometimes people also write words, and I'm like, I always give this simple example. Centro di Barrio. The Dutch people don't know what a Centro di Barrio is. I mean, sometimes we have to explain the context that we're in so they understand why certain resources or requests are being made. So sometimes it seems silly to explain certain aspects, but remember, they don't live here, they don't know the context. It would be ideal to have people in place that know the context, but I mean, at this moment, we have to work with what we got. So really describe in detail the context that you are presenting your own proposal in.
And that's why it's important, I would say as well, to take up contact also while you're writing your proposal with the people who I put the contact persons of, because they will also attend you to these things. If they read it globally and they're like, oh, but we don't know what this means, then you get help with that. And so that's why that connection with the contactpersoon is also very important.
Yeah. So this, I mean, we're doing here a very brief general introduction to grant writing. There are people, I don't know how many people there are in Aruba and on the ABC SSS Islands, but in the Netherlands, for example, there are professional grant writers, fondsenwervers, who do this. The situation here is different, right? So this is kind of the first step in trying to think about what can we do ourselves, and as cultural professionals, social domain professionals, and what in the future maybe we can get support with. But okay, so then you describe the challenge, this challenge of we don't get enough funds, and then you say, this challenge matches the priorities of the funder. So whatever you do, always go back to the funder. What are their priorities? Because you are solving a problem for them. So you need to show, I am the right person to solve the problem, but also, this problem is important to you. Yes, please. Okay, then you've described the problem and why the problem is important to the funder. Now you have to go in depth into your target group. Who will your project engage? And these can be active participants who are doing the work with you, but it can also be audiences, maybe for your event, for your workshop, for your performance. Depending on the project, I mean, you know this better than I do, it can be any kind of audience. But it's very important to be specific and define them. Your audience is never everybody in Aruba. Never. It's not concrete enough for a funder. They need to understand, who are you talking about, why them, what are the needs of this group?
So specify that like with an age group or a group that lives in a specific town, barrio, you know, stuff like that. Just be that specific in the grant.
Yeah, a specific school of the people living around Casa Cultura. I mean, it can be any kind of thing, but the more specific and explained, the better, because then they will understand what's going to happen and why. So why this group? Describe the group. Then what are the specific needs of this target group? You have to show that you know what you're talking about and that you are going to address those needs. Then, is the target group involved from the start? This is not always a requirement for the calls, but it is good to show that you have been in contact, you have access to this group, you understand this group. Maybe even one of the grant writers or people on the project is the group. That makes your proposal so much stronger, and it actually makes your project more effective. So it's a very helpful way to do this from the beginning, to talk to the people that you're delivering a project to, because it should be done together. And then, of course, why are you the right person to do it? So why do you have the correct expertise in this network in Bonaire, Bambisa, of all the dance schools? Why are you the one who is going to do this? How do you engage with the target audience? And why shouldn't somebody else do it? Maybe they would be much better at it. So make clear that you have the expertise. And if you don't, make sure you find the partners that can fill that out so your project gets better. In the end, the goal is also that it's a solid project that can be funded.
And this is very important, especially if you move toward the international fund, so EU level. There is an entire section where you have to sell yourself. Who are you? What is your expertise, your background? Why are you the fit for this call? Why should you get 40,000 euros, right? So the larger the fund or more international you go, the emphasis on who you are and your expertise is very important. And this is also the reason why in the section of partnerships, you are also required to give that kind of level of information of your partners. So who are they? And especially when you're involved in research type activities, they want to know, okay, so you have this university involved, you have this NGO involved, you have this partner involved, and there is a lot of emphasis on, okay, who are you and why are you equipped, or why should we give you the money in order to implement your project?
Yeah, and I think it is helpful. I mean, it's important for us as well to be reflective, self-reflective, and a bit critical. Are we the right person? Should I be doing this alone? Or maybe I should be doing it with somebody else. And again, be specific. Give concrete examples. Flowery language just confuses the committee. You know, it's very practical. It's a job. You sit there, you get 5 proposals that you have to read before, you know, next Friday. And you just want to understand and read a good project that is clear and that suits the call. The committee wants, like I said, the committee wants the projects to succeed, but help them, make it clear, be specific.
Don't make it complicated or assume that because it's a Dutch fund, they require jargon. Like, please be as simple as you can. Write in simple language, write in concrete words. Don't use words that you don't use daily. Try to avoid words that you yourself don't use. So try to be as practical and as straightforward as possible, because for them, they will like reading your proposal so much more when they can read through your proposal easily.
Yeah, make it fun. Make it fun for us, please.
Next one.
Yes. Okay. So you've described the problem and why you're the right person to do this, who your audience is, who you're doing it with, and what the needs are of the audience. Now, what is the goal? My goal is for everybody in this room to feel more comfortable thinking about writing a grant proposal, maybe even feeling already ready to start. So when you write your goal or describe your goal, you have to answer the question, what do you want to achieve in response to this challenge that you described in your introduction? What comes out of this project? And then the funding agency is always like SMART goals, so not I want you to feel inspired to write, but you know, maybe I could say I would like to see that in 2022 there are at least 15 proposals from Aruba, 20 from Curaçao, etc., of which 25% are successful. There we go. So be specific about what you want to achieve. Very specific. Concrete. Who, what, where. Measurable. How will you know when you've achieved it? So think how many, how much, or use other types of frameworks in which you can evaluate. Is it achievable? Is it realistic? What if I say I want 200 proposals from Aruba and I want 100% to be successful? Yeah. Then the funder is going to be like, yeah, I mean, nice,
Come on,
but...
nice try.
So, is it achievable? Is it relevant? Why is this important in the context of the problem you sketched, in the context of the target audience, and very importantly, in the context of the funder? How does this relate to the goals of the funder? So keep going back whenever you're writing and try to see, like, is this still making sense? Then, is it time-bound? I said 2022. Is that a reasonable amount of time for all of these things to happen? And let's say I'm asking for funding for 1 year or for 6 months only. Can I do what I'm saying I can do with the money that I'm requesting and within a time? So will I be able to achieve that in the span of the project's timeline? Again, be specific, concise, clear language. Let's try it. What do you think? Maybe we can you've been listening to us, mabasa tempo ka ba? Maybe you're a bit tired, you want to turn around, talk to your neighbor.
It's almost a break.
Let's do an activity. Think about that idea that you just thought of when I asked, does everybody here have an idea? And we're going to do 5 minutes for each of the slides that I just showed. We're going to go back to them. First, spend 5 minutes thinking, writing, and maybe talking to the person next to you, one-on-one, and saying, what is the challenge? What is the problem? So use 5 minutes to do that. And maybe take some notes as well. Then, the next 5 minutes, what is your goal? What do you want to achieve? The next 5 minutes, what is your target group? And be specific in who that is. Then 5 minutes to discuss. And then we'll have a couple of you come up and share what you came up with. So we'll have the last 10 minutes for sharing among all of us. Yes, sounds good? Maybe we can go back to the first slide. And for the people on Zoom, you can do this as well, of course. So spend one more. One further, please. Yeah. No. The other way. Yeah. Yes, challenge. So spend 5 minutes discussing the challenge that you have and look at these 4 points. So sketch the current situation, where are you based, describe the challenge, and maybe the last one, maybe you already know where you would like to apply, maybe not, then you can just skip point number 4. 5 minutes, and then we go to the next one. And discuss with the person next to you, brainstorm a bit, stretch your legs if needed.
Okay, so round off your final thoughts. And I hope we can get some volunteers to share what they discussed. Despesa, ok, de 5 minutos. Será que não está pausa ainda?
I think people misunderstood.
Yeah. Hagali, Bignuma. Okay, so let's pay attention. We're going to appoint a couple of volunteers. Central. Let's keep the attention. Tulhende. Nós também temos pausa de 5 minutos. Let's. Okay, so we have one volunteer.
Está trabajando?
Sí, te trago.
Bom dia, Turhende. Meu nome é Magali Maduro, sou coordenador na Fundação contra a Violência Relacional. Me pensa, e Rafi ajudar-me com a ideia aqui. O que nós reparamos é nossa fundação, tá? Nós temos tudo de personal development de nossos clientes. Nós temos shelter onde a mulher não está experienciar violência extrema, também cerca de nós, junto com a Yunan. Den geração é nossa experiência, com, por exemplo, durante uma sessão de arte de pintamento, me dá par de senhora, assim, tá wak e canvas, wak e quashi, e na nossa aqui com panhasi. Nunca não há sia trabalhar com quashi, nunca não pinta. Den é por que den é problema, a mente está paralisada. Não tem contato com a cultura, não está pobre mentalmente. Pois me pensa que ele me quer fazer. Mi target group, mi grupo que me trabaja con ellos está Battered Women. El goal que me quer reach está para get in tune com culture, door de get in tune com a miss. Me está bem bom, Rafi? Sim, nós dois estamos a pé.
Não, partner.
É meu partner, sim. O efeito que nós queremos está dan confidence bijhouden, dan self-identity creëren, dan self-love, self-worth, self-everything bijhouden. Me também busca partners. Me pensa riba o par de gente particular como conhece que the great painters in our society. Qual tá Night Matthew, qual tá Atelier 89, pero assim não tem mais que me propõe de colaboração. Mi proyecto lo me quiere para más o menos 6 lunas. Para me perdona diferente partner, oportunidad para não drag, não steentje bij, na mi grupo. Lo me quer ser mi proyecto com tentoonstelling. Essa aqui sua meta tapa é confidence, die gente morrena aqui. Shoot through the roof.
Danke, Magali. Feedback.
Yes.
First impression. Você também ganha placa, você também ganha placa, sim.
Siguro que sim.
Sim, dus, tem vários pontos que não estava específico suficiente. Passou de exemplo de goal, quanto gente mulheres para piano de DJ. Então, específico sim, de essência de, ok, para 6 lunas, so you have a clear goal as to, or a time frame. Ok, isso aqui também é projeto para 6 lunas, pero definitivamente, como feedback, nós também dando feedback, esse aqui é definitivamente bom exemplo de projeto que por ganhar fundo. De como para sobre é clear target group, é clear example como está engage certo target group de cultura, de exponer target group aqui na arte, dus elemento cultural tá queda. Pero ito added advantage para certo fundo para dizer, hey, nós estamos targeting full audience que portanto normalmente nós não estamos targeting. Mas a maioria viaja mucha joven, right? So, but targeting full out of the box group. E para funds, esse é também, oh wow, this is impact. Ja, dus esse é também 5 centos.
Sim, a mim também é bastante duidelijk in die zin, lo qual a mim está missing tiki mais específico da se ora magari visa cultura be more specific. Quatro workshops lang, nanta bij pinta, nanta bij workshops in self development, kenta bij dunele, toere write that out. All of those things, write that out. Kidia nanta bij vindt plaats, is het dan met importante, pa geef aan een timeline, is het algo ku lo porta más específico para dar más información. Algo otro que lo porta más específico también, anto nos kind of touch upon that. I'm papiando pavimento, pero English maybe. Is maybe focusing as well on a little bit more of porta cortico, on the context of Kiko e situación na Aruba ku e ser mujer aqui. Wat is de context? Natuurlijk, mundo is diferente. Kijk, een percentage misschien iets meer specifiek daarop zijn. Niet persona no lo queremos, pero me te quiere elo add emphasis to que está problema hopi grande. Sí.
Sí, me te quiere. I think you've covered a lot of the points already. I don't have more feedback, but I did just tell Magali that actually her pitch suits a call that is currently opening very, very well. That's a call at Fonds voor Cultuurparticipatie called Samen Cultuur Maken, Making Culture Together. And that call is specifically focused on bringing the social sector and the cultural sector together to work on cultural participation. So it suits almost perfectly. One tip that I would give is that it is a cultural fund. So a lot of the goals that were mentioned were social goals about strengthening the women. Also think about the cultural goals. What are the artistic goals? What is that part of the process? But as you read the call, you will see that, it'll tell you exactly what you need to fulfill in your description.
Considering the time, maybe we can have one volunteer more, then we can have another volunteer after the break.
Você pode pagar ergo? Boa noite, meu nome. Boa noite, eu. Bom dia, meu nome é Taísia Além.
Thais?
Taísia.
Taísia,
I know. Met the Royal Dreams Foundation, my grupo happens to be all into music just like I am. So perfect. Nos ideia tá para thank you, to have a space for music. Aruba não tem lugar que você vai como hobby para expressar isso. We need a studio or something que não pode hire workshops de writing, não pode hire workshops de beat, whatever you need as. I'm nervous, sorry. Caminho que não pode vir junto, não pode socializar também, socialize com outra pessoa, não tem as you notice, hobby nangting, hobby mental health issues are working a lot. We don't only need music, but music is one of those spaces where girls and guys can come, they can sit, they can talk, they can learn, they can write, they can probably learn how to make a video clip or whatever, pero para mí kung nalota super interesa ding algo asina, compra ako, okay, let's just, what? Yeah, I mean, no sa, pero tiyo because ng kumit, pati dang a while. It's a problem kung nos not ting ang kaminda, pabay, pa-expressa. That's it. They don't have a place to express themselves right now. Problem solved, they got a place, okay. Then, what do they do when they're there? They will get different workshops, like I mentioned. For how long, the period, para mí, it has to be indefinite. E napotajis luna, 2, 3 luna so. E meseta caminho kuta accessible all the time. Namporiega. Hopefully mama kutata nota flip ko, pero po yun. No, lagi bing, lagyan ng expressa na mis. Abotin ko di, add, si buso nang di mi grupo. So mi sota kinanang ta, frio ka ba?
Okay, so maybe we can start by giving
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah. It was pretty clear. So, yeah. Oh, let me go stand here. So what I thought immediately when she talked about, in that sense, that there's a huge problem, I had to think about Fonds Podiumkunsten actually immediately. And what I want to add, and it's a good thing for everyone to know, is that that's what I find personally lacking often with funds. They give really specific project-based funding most, like 90% of the time. So I hear you, and I know that it's a structural problem, but what I always advise, because I don't just work with one fund, I work with a lot of different artists and makers who have these ideas. They say the same thing, it should be structural. But what I'm advising is that you do put it in like a project timeline. Make it a year or 2 years, that is often realistic as well for funds. So the problem to me was very clear in that sense.
I would say in their case, they can make a pilot program.
Yes, exactly.
Which will run for 1 year.
Yes.
Based on that pilot program, they can get a limited funds to come.
Exactly. And what is also, because I'm targeting your proposal in that sense specifically from Fonds Podiumkunsten, because that's the immediate fund I had to think about. What is important, I will show the slides later after the break, is that you have specific regelingen where you would need to cut up this very big plan that you have in different pieces. That is something I could advise anyone. If you have a big plan like this that has different samenwerkingspartners, different goals, because you can have multiple goals for one big project, because it's cultural, it's social, etc. You have to cut up the way you apply, I would say, as well.
Yeah, so as an example, if you have 5 goals, then you make it clear that you're applying to this specific fund to fund goal 1.
Yeah.
So they know that they're part of a more holistic,
Yes,
wider
approach,
project.
yeah.
When you say you want the fund to exist forever, funds get nervous. Like you are becoming way too dependent on this one fund. Yeah. So, Gyonne said, most funds don't fund long-term projects or structural projects. So specifically, all projects have to have a start and end date. That is very important. And I think it's also important for future workshops for us to engage in conversation as to the other funding streams that exist. Yeah,
Yes.
so grant funding usually means there's a start and end date. And this counts for local, regional, international, global, all levels.
And
so
I
then,
think, sorry, you can also approach it, what I always advise the people, but I will get to my advice later on, but it's applicable to this situation, is you have a long-term structural problem in the society that you want to do this project in. I would always advise to see, okay, you do it for a year or two to do the pilot, like the Miss said in front, and that you think about, okay, afterwards, how can we reinvent the same, like go a step further and do a different project. And that way you can create a sort of structural change because you see the impact, they see the impact, but it's a different project with some of the same goals. Tibisay, I don't know if you want to add anything?
I can add maybe that question of you want this to be there forever is also a question that is interesting to the funder. And it's about sustainability. What will happen when the money runs out? We will talk about that in a second, and I think there you can look at structural things in the society, other partners who have the same goals, and you can use this pilot as a type of proof of concept. This works, and we need to keep investing, and that could be related to policy in the educational sector, maybe at the government level, but in other cases it can be something very different. It can also be something at a European level. You can maybe do now a small project funded by one of the Dutch Rijksfondsen and develop that into something bigger. But it's really important to embed it within a context of what are the movements happening with youth in Aruba and with music in Aruba. How is it part of a bigger picture?
yes, and it's also very important to limit the thought process that only I want to do the project. So maybe it's a good idea to partner with other youth organizations, YMCA or something like that. They have the building, they have the youth, they have the resources, they have the AFDAC, they have all of that. So combine your idea, the artists, those facilities, and combine it with YMCA. Hey, YMCA, do you want to partner, blah, 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 blah. And then most of that structural aspect is covered, right? So sometimes try to limit your problems, yeah? Make your problem or the scope smaller by partnering. And that is a very important aspect of why partnering is so important, because bota limita e limitasyon. Yeah, so with this said, let's take a break. Adrian maybe wants to say something.
Yes, pero que nos vai de break, nos tem algum anúncio hopi importante. Nossa amiga Desiree Correa a publicar seu book Drama Real. E Desiree lota para fora durante a pausa com o book, pensando que deseja de adquirir em vez de 35 florin, ave você por aí na 30 florin. Se acaso você não tem cash, me quer você por donar você número, você info e de uma maneira ou outra você lo haya a publicação aqui, tremenda publicação, por certo. Dia 21 de fevereiro, que já luna, Prins Bernhard Cultura Fonds tem outro info session. Camina ng Lobay conta tiki mais de projeto aqui que já Gyonne, Tibisay e Thais a mencionado de que não serve como eigenlijk matchmaker entre nós aqui banda e Rijksfondsen na Holanda. Dia 21 de fevereiro, lota de setor para Nuebor. Nang lo hasie, pes nang kuta mirando via Zoom na Corsou, elo guardo hasi na Maritiem Museum, na Van den Brandhofstraat, na Scharlo, na Corsou. Pero nós aqui nang kuta desea di atender sa aqui, boporo aqui via livestream via Facebook, di Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds Caribisch Gebied, so Facebook. Dus entre setor con Nuebor, ja luna, dia 21 próximo. Nanti look forward para waboso. Es nan kuta na Corsou. E es nan kinanku quizás quer sa mais de projeto, e pilot project aqui, nós temos invitado boso para visitar a página. Es unang de Zoom, nós está tomando break aqui ding, e Zoom session tá queda live see. Dus não quero que o sound tá caia fof so, pero agora aqui es nan kuta presente por vai para fo, para comer sandwich, comer cookie, beber iced tea, água. Pesnang kuta vegetarian, ti umba aqui de vegetarian sandwiches, ribeton bank na entrada. Dus você pode ter a opção em antame, nós vamos tomar break de more or less 20 minutos. Alright? More or less. É por ver tiki mais. Enjoy. Bom apetite.
Awam meeting ko ba hindi niya assurance pabusca seguro contra candela y robo. Minopolaga nada pa sa mikas sunod. Aha, inolubidade inclui cobertura adicional de damage to building.
Raisel, nenhuma não posta essa informação aqui?
Ma, ora mi kompanya mami pa ba India assurance mitami tapone atensyon.
Trusted by millions around the world.
Paisnan ku quizás no haya oportunidad para registrar. Hello? Folks? Suante central rato?
Pim, pim, pim.
Portami digo kung isa kanta o pida de yung kantika. Paisnan ku Paisnan ku no haya oportunidad para registrar ainda. Por passa ser caminho of seca Arthur para você haya papel para registrar e nota diz pa nós temos boa informação e ideia não tá para nos compartilhar boa informação hacia público sino para nós porque dá em contato com você para futuro projeto não para futuro workshop não então agora que Arthur está partindo survey mas nem avisa na princípio o survey tá queda anônimo para você por dar nossa impressão de vosso pensamento tocante workshop de AWE. Você por entregar isso aqui cerca mim, of cerca Arthur. No final, doesn't matter. So, isso nós está pone documento não junto. Riba survey aqui, você por pone vossa sugerência não também, vossa ideia não. Corda que isso aqui está é prome workshop. Nós está muito contente com a response. E ideia tá para não queda diz na uno. A ideia tá para não seguir empower bosso, para não seguir empower nos mes, para nós também por seguir adquirir conhecimento, etc. E para nós por seguir trabalhar para capacity building. Pois se não com não registrar ainda, nós tá encarecidamente pedir para você registrar. Se não com tá online via Zoom, nós tem vosso info, se nos mag, nós vamos seguir compartilhar tipo de iniciativa ng aqui com você. Quizás nos manda a survey pandang via email, pandang também por hasi a survey aqui. Para sobra ta hope importante a trobe para nos pohaya vosso pensamento, vosso impressão, vosso crítica construtiva para sobra sina nos por seguir crescer. Sorry? Sim? Alright. Bom provecho ainda turende. E aqui também tem a última parte de workshop de AWE. E depois já sei corda que tem Q&A session, camina por hasi pergunta e manema pedi na princípio se por hasi den micrófono para sobre nos tem gente nang mirando via Zoom também, não também manda pergunta para sina tur gente por escuta. E se você tem tempo depois de Q&A, você porque dá para seguir network com outro, quizás compartilhar ideia nang e quizás por de algum projeto hope great tá nasce. Alright? Tibisay? Tá? Sorry. Não, me dá querendo que tá. Pafo. Alright. Nós seguimos com o workshop, não via Zoom. Danke por vossa paciência. Enjoy.
Danke. Hello? Sí. It is better I enjoy a break, also for the people online. So what we just did was define the first parts of the project, the problem, the target audience, and the goals. For the committee and for the funds, it's very important to understand not only what is the problem, what is the goal, but also exactly how you are going to do it, step by step. So how are the elements of your project going to very concretely contribute to the goal? This is a very important part of the project that I think hopefully we will have future workshops addressing this specifically because it does take some time and thinking, but I'll go very briefly. This means that you need steps and a timeline. When is what going to happen? And a direct link between your goals and what you're actually going to do. So you can split the project into phases, what happens when are the moments for key outputs, when is when are the rehearsals? When is the performance? When are you doing evaluation? Things like this. And so the timeline in this is very important, just to make it very concrete for the funder how your project is going to translate into something that you can see, feel, hear, participate in. But we will, Go Cultura will make sure that there is a workshop specifically for this, because this is it's a very short summary, right? And it takes a bit more thinking and writing.
Yeah, so there is definitely many project management skills or project management related workshops that we intend to give that covers this segment of grant writing. So using, for example, logic framework models in your proposal to identify what goes into your project, what happens during your project, what comes out, so the output and then the impact. And this on various levels such as micro, meso, macro level. So I know that this is very vague, but be aware that there might be possible workshops specifically on how do you incorporate project management skills in writing your proposal.
Yes. So just to give an example about the space for youth and music, there you can very concretely say the first 3 months of the project, we will maybe do some research, talk to the youth, sit together with the partners, and make sure we know which kinds of workshops we're going to give. Then the second 3 months, we're going to pilot the workshops. Then we evaluate. Then the month 6 to 9, it's continued implementation. And maybe month 9 to 12, we practice for a final performance at month 12. Very specifically like this, who is the audience, what are you doing, makes it very clear for the funder what exactly you're going to do. So again, the same, be specific, concise, clear. Partnerships. We've talked about this already, so I'll go fast. Who are you doing this with? First point, as much as possible in both the social domain and the cultural sector, collaboration, not competition. So increasingly also, this is not just an idealistic thing that I'm saying because I think it's important. I do think it's important, but the funders also think it's important, and they decide who gets money. So increasingly, funders prioritize collaboration, so don't do this alone. And in this, it's also important to reflect on the goals of the different partners. Fundação para a Mulher em Dificuldade might have a very different goal than an art school. Yeah, and then the question is, where do these goals overlap? So that diagram that we saw at the beginning between your project and the funder, the same between the partners. Where do we find this common ground? And how does then how are my goals accomplished with this project? And that for all the partners. And if you can show that, then the funder sees, okay, this is actually an equitable collaboration. It's a fair collaboration. It brings benefit for everybody. So these people will also be involved in making it happen. They want this to succeed because it's important to them. And then also make very clear what is each partner responsible for in the project, who does what, and also what is the expertise of each partner, why these partners. Next one, please. Evaluation, how to measure success. We all have a lot of hopes and dreams of things we want to achieve. But when do we know that we've succeeded? This is a part of every proposal. In some grants, it is something that you can think of after, but more and more, it's something you have to think about from the beginning. So it's very important, even if they don't ask for it, to think about how you will evaluate if something is successful. So what will the project evaluate? Who will evaluate it? What information will be collected? Are we going to ask the youth how they're doing? Are we going to register attendance numbers? And if we see not enough people are attending, at which point in the project can we say stop, wait, evaluate, think, and adapt? Change something so that the project can be successful. So really thinking about what makes a project a success and how can we evaluate this. Yes? Communication. This is also, think about your project, but also about the funder. The funder is giving you money to do something, and they want to see it out there. They don't want it to be a secret. So talk to your friend who's a specialist in marketing or promotion or communication, and think about how will you share the project's progress and results, and include that as well in the proposal, because then the funder can see, okay, this is also going to be out there. Thais already mentioned it a little bit. I think it was Thais, right? Yes. So think about events, exhibitions. How will you use social media, your own organization social media, your partner's organization social media, radio, news, videos, reports, publications, research. Who are the ambassadors? Who are going to talk about your project? And this, you can think about this locally, only in Aruba, only in Ceiba, but you can also think about it between islands. We can also think about it with the country where the funder is based and internationally in general. Something very important, I'm thinking now, about the partnerships that I mentioned. The partners don't just have to be in one island, right? You can also have, for many funds, especially the Kingdom funds, partners with organizations on different islands, on the ABC SSS islands. So that's also another added benefit that can really make the project more fun as well for you to do.
Something to also highlight, some of the agencies also require you to hand in some kind of a marketing plan that they can upload on their own website. Remember that the agency is also proud that they will fund your project. So they will ask you information that they can post on their own website. So they can kind of share with the other stakeholders what kind of projects they're funding. So be prepared to receive those kinds of questions as well.
Yes, something very interesting actually that Audrey just told me is that she's an expert in marketing, among many other things. And that she realized that actually writing a proposal is also kind of like the work that she does in marketing. So you might not know a grant writer, but you may know someone who knows about writing proposals for other types of projects who can also help think along with you on how to structure this once they know what is required. So maybe we can find help in unlikely places. Yeah. Good point, writers as well. I mean, if you want to add something.
Yeah, this is a very important aspect, and I would say in the last couple of years, many of the agencies have been focusing more attention on sustainability, duurzaamheid. Yeah, how in the sense of how will you, or how do you propose that your project will be sustainable in the future, even though that the funds are not providing funding on a long-term basis, they are interested in hearing your perspective on how you are planning to keep your project sustainable. And sustainable can mean different things. What parts of the project continue after funding ends? Are there specific things that you envision continuing? You should inform the agency. Let them know that, okay, even though the funding with you ends at this point, we do have next phases that are coming up. Yeah, so you have to be very consistent and be honest with the funder as well how you are going to handle this aspect. What will happen in the community? So if you're providing a workshop, what is the child or the youth going to take away, right? So you have to be clear as to the type of impact you have on society and in what ways you consider sustainability. The partners, so once you partnered with, I would say, at least one minimum agency, how will that look like in the future? Is your partnership also sustainable? Are you going to continue working together, or is this a one-stop shop, right? So they are also interested in making sure that even your partnerships are sustainable.
And just to add, you don't have to. Sometimes a partnership is a tryout, and you don't know if you will continue working together, and that is also okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to commit to each other for life, but you can also, but you can also mention that and explain it, and that's also fine. You don't have to have all the answers as long as it's clear that you've thought about it.
Especially in the context, I would say, like, if the partnership is just beginning and you're trying out, not just generally, but also in Aruba, like, oh, there are different fundations that do the same thing, and we're trying out this partnership now to see where we overlap and what we can add. And then it's good as well to explicitly give that context of the island, in this case, Aruba, or any of the other islands, and how that works. And I think that applies to that as well.
what these funding agencies love to read is that you relate your project to existing policies or strategies of the country. Sustainable Development Goals, very simple framework, the SDGs. I hope that everyone here has heard about the SDGs, but these funds love reading that you are relating your project to the sustainable goals, that you're saying, okay, my project impacts the youth, and that is impacted on the Sustainable Development Goal 4, this target. So then they know, wow, you are purposefully looking into how your project impacts the greater good, the wider scope. And this is the same thing when it comes to policies, maybe local policies from the government. That you say, okay, the government currently is focusing on X, Y, and Z. This is how my project contributes to X, Y, and Z. So this is a way how they see that you're trying to create sustainability in the efforts that exist, like the SDGs or government policies, or that you say, my NGO has this miljardenplan. Yeah, you have this miljardenplan for 5 years. I'm out of the camera, sorry. Your organization has a specific policy that you're relating that to your proposal as well. So always create some kind of a connection to policies, strategies that are there. This is the section that most grant writers are afraid of, the budget. And most applicants have issues with the budget. I know that most people are maybe not as equipped or as knowledgeable of what a budget requires, but this is a very, very important aspect of the proposal. This can make or break your proposal. You can write the best project goal, have the smartest goal, have the long list of partners, university, 5-3 organizations, but if your budget is weak, you're denied immediately. Why? Is because these funds have to be responsible with the money that they are investing. And if they notice that your plan or your project proposal cannot guarantee good investment of money, even though your own plan is amazing and it serves women, it serves battered women, they will not fund your project, period. Many organizations or many fondsen, they will give you a guideline as to what matrix or matrix model you should use. Many times they already offer the outline. Either it's a specific Excel sheet or it's a specific form that is specifically catered to their budget, because they want to avoid that everyone comes with a different budget scheme. So many times they already have one made for you, content clar. You just have to fill it in and it calculates your budget. It's very important to justify your budget. What do we mean with this? Many times people add stuff to the budget and the commission is like, why is this in the budget? Or they don't understand after reading the proposal why a certain item is listed. So you will always notice that some of the funding agencies will also require you to hand in a summary of the budget justification, an explanation as to why certain things are in the budget. Over-explain, Manson. Over-explain rather than under-explain. No lagahin ng assume things. Yeah? No assumi. No assumi ko nang takomprende. No assumi ko nang sa. No assumi ko nang sa ko huurzal na API ta ko sa siyang paora. Whatever. Of kusieto resources nang ta inclui. Never assume. That is the worst thing you can do, because you have to remember they don't know the contacts, not always. And you have to be sure that when you are handing in a proposal that you are safe in that regard.
I would also advise, if you have a project that has many different sections, or it's very long, like for a year or two already, or even sometimes projects that are for 6 months, always break it down in segments of the program. So you have like the marketing segment, but you have like the zaalverhuur, so that's the productie, the production segment of the budget. You have also the tarieven for the people who get paid, because in the Netherlands, a lot of the, or actually all of the funds, they pay for the man hours that someone
Uurloon,
puts
yeah.
in the project. So the project leader, the artist, the production person, the camera person, noem het maar op. All of those things need to be put in segments. Dus when you go and write your project, try to also think of the vertaling to the budget. And you can do that in sections, like all of the different sections that are needed to make your plan a reality. Also the samenwerkingspartners. All of those aspects you can you can break down in the you have to break down in the budget.
And I mean, the models are standardized or basic, your inkomsten, uitkomsten. So what are your expenses or income? And you have to be honest with this information. I have seen proposals where people lie on the proposal. And this is very dangerous, and don't do this, because it's unethical. 1, and 2, you're not going to get funded. Yeah, so don't write a amount that we know for sure that is not the truth, right? So if you say huurzaal 10.000 gulden, hallo, ik bedoel 10.000 voor een huurzaal, ik bedoel, ja, dus there are instances where people do that. Nanta hinkong kachi extra kinang, hinkong kachi extra inang, and we know that that's not the real cost price of that item. Budget everything. Pensa di todo tipo de gasto que você tem, hasta gasto que você nota mira. Hinka din po budget também post the unforeseen costs. Some people hand in projects, they have no unforeseen costs. COVID adal, ata kung natabi sige ko ng project, paso nang no a budget post A. Be realistic with your budget. Yeah, if you know that you have 10 expenses, mention all 10 expenses. Question? It depends on the fund. Usually there is a guideline. There's a guideline as to this.
Also, it depends on the total sum that you are asking.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the funds, dingen guidelines, as be unforeseen cost, mag dan max 10% of max 5%. This is why reading the guidelines is important, because they mention it and it's standard for all calls.
Yes, but there are also funds that do not have this option. So it's very important to check the requirements, because some funds will fund onvoorziene kosten. Some will say, no, you need to think of everything. Some funds will not fund the salary of the person doing the project, while others will say, I can't fund this because nobody's doing it, so this is going to fail. So nobody's getting paid to do this. So you really got to target, again, also in the budget, to the specific funder and the call.
And that's why it's important to know, if you are an organization that is requesting funding from multiple agencies, know the difference between the agencies. Because, like mentioned, if you are applying to an organization or to a funding agency that wants to see an uurloon for the people that are part of the project, if you don't do this, you will not get funded. You can have an amazing project again, you can have everything decked out and perfect, but because you're not paying salary costs to the professionals in the project, you will get denied.
About the co-financing. There are a lot of funds that ask for co-financing. I have had myself going from the closet to the living room, because I go to Cultura Fonds and they say co-financing. So they are ready to approve me and everything, but I need co-financing. I go to UNOCA, they tell me, you need co-financing. If I don't have one anchored, then I cannot get the other. So you remain going from one to the other, one to the other.
Hi, I'm Rafi. I'm here for the Prince Bernhard Culture Fund, and I wanna really explain to you that we will co-finance, and we will actually give you a yes before you finish. I'd say having all of your funds, so it can help you to get more funds. But I'm just saying that when you're saying you cannot get co-finance, you can. So if it's a cultural project, if you give in your request, we also require, by the way, because we do not fund everything either, we require co-funding, but we will give you, if we think your project is good, we will tell you already, you can get a letter saying this is already approved by Prince Bernhard Culture Fund, so you can, exactly. So you can take that to other ones and build up your budget.
And this is, Marian.
Hi, bom dia, bom dia. Since Rafi also mentioned that Prince Bernhard, no? They do co-financing. UNOCA also does co-financing, and it's been right before now, there's been a habit of, if we know, the both organizations, if we know that there's one project that have simultaneous petitions at UNOCA or at Prince Bernhard Funds, we contact each other and we're like, hey, you know of this project? Are you interested in financing? And then we co-finance like that. And it's becoming practice now that we give pre-approval. So we say like, okay, we approve this amount with the condition that Prince Bernhard also approves, or the other way around. Or with a condition that, okay, let's say you have a project for 30,000 florins and we can finance only 10,000. We tell you, okay, we can approve for 10,000, but you have to prove that you have received or that you are going to receive the other 20,000 to complete the project, because otherwise you're not going to get the money from us.
So this is why this is very important to communicate with the agency. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation and assumptions, and many times if you have a bad experience, you share your bad experience to another colleague, and then they assume that they can't do a project, and this is very dangerous. Yeah. So, and there are other ways how to co-finance. And this is why it's important to maybe talk about the other funding streams that exist, and to navigate that terrain, because many funding agencies do require a form of co-financing.
I would also say that fund is not specifically financing the ABC SSS islands, so I can give the context as well. So I work as a bureauadviseur for Fonds ZOZ and in the Netherlands, and what we have is that fund is specifically also set out to grant the applicants that don't have any other co-financing. So one of the goals to, like, for starters or people who don't have that and nang doel nang tapas kudinos, we finance it. So what Thais said as well, it's very important to see what kind of goal the funds have, because generally all of the funds that we mentioned and what we already hear is that there is a movement, you could say, of thinking differently in how financial, in that sense, investment is being given to the different individuen and the stichtingen, also in the ABC SSS islands, because the funds in the Netherlands, I'm talking about that personally, see that the context of financing is also different on the ABC SSS islands, and that co-financing is a bit more rougher sometimes to get in this context.
And they're definitely looking into it as well, and I hope that also the pilot with Prince Bernhard Cultuurfonds can contribute to this understanding. But I know already that the funds are aware and they are looking at options, ways to make this, to facilitate this.
And some calls don't even need co-financing.
Yeah.
So it's also a regeling, what we talked about. Some regelingen don't need co-financing and some do. So again, terms of conditions is very important, but that's also broadening.
And another thing that can contribute to this is looking very reflectively at the in-kind contributions. Sometimes if you have a strategic partner with, for example, a theater, they might give in kind, you can use the space for free. But that has value. And that you can write down. You can write it. You have to be honest and open, but also show that a theater is contributing so many hours, which is the equivalent of so many mil florin. And that is also a type of co-financing.
Yeah, and you have to write that number down. So just because it's a sponsorship or an in-kind doesn't mean you don't list it on your budget. It's still part of your budget, just it's an in-kind contribution. Tamara.
I would like to
Mic,
talk about
microphone please. Patuhin online tayo escucha.
when you talk about co-financing and financing, there's another hurdle I found myself with in research. Everywhere in the world, research, you are paid for it. Here, I went to ask for financing, and a part of my project has research in it, and that's your personal contribution. If I have to spend a year at Archivo Nacional, 8 hours a day to find all the material, all the research and everything, do interviews and everything, how can it be possible that my research is voluntary work, and who's going to feed me and who's going to pay for the roof over my
so
head?
this is very important when you inventorize the calls. Most Dutch calls cover salary costs, Manson. It's common standard. Na Hollanda, when you are applying for a project, you have the slot to add salary and personal salary costs. Even if you...
But it's not even personal, it's
Yeah,
part of the
it's
project
part
in
of
this
the
specific
project.
case.
So, and especially when you are focused on research, research projects are funded as well throughout these calls in the Netherlands. And they do expect you to add salary costs, even if you're the one that's part of the research team and you are the one that's applying for the funding, your own salary costs should be included in the
I
budget.
think we need to go a bit forward
Yeah.
due
Yeah.
to time.
Yeah, and we'll have a Q&A
late-
session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing, the salary cost that's specific to the Rijksfondsen, that's not possible with all funds. Some funds are smaller or have different priorities.
More private
But
funds.
in the Netherlands, there's a cultural code of fair practice, and it's expected that people are paid fairly for their work. So it's also a different framework that they're
Yes.
operating in. It's a different
and-
level of budgets.
Yeah.
So again,
And we have to be
clear.
realistic as well with the resources. We can't expect large funds or small funds to uphold the same level as larger funds. We have to remember, Hollanda ting hopi seng. Ja, na ting hopi mas trabajador. Ja, ik bedoel maar
Conclusion
gewoon-
of today.
But it's true. They have more workers. They have more people in staff. They have more funding. Compara com uno Canaruba. So we can't compare them and hold them to the same standard. Even though that's the goal in the future, maybe.
This is
Investir más
the
in
context.
cultura.
Yeah.
Cultura, yes! Pero the reality of the situation is, kung na Aruba, inversyon ni kultura ta limita. So we can't get mad at UNOCA, right? So, or we can't get frustrated because they have other priorities.
And
Miho
we're giving more
algo ko nada.
options today.
Yeah, so let's move on maybe to...
Tips and extra.
Yes, this is the most important aspect of today, I think.
The project plan tips. I think you were gonna, because I have the best practice tips, but
Okay, so these are general, I would say a
No,
summary of general tips that we have summarized from today's workshop. So show your plan answers the call. So target it step by step. So be detailed as to how your call will help the funding agency to reach their wider goal. Use keywords from the call thoroughly. Guys, read the call and use the word that they're using. If they're using the word impact, hinka impact din ba call. If they're using the word stimulate, engage, use those concepts in your call, because then they are they're going to notice that you read the call and that you are interested in
And that
in
you
their goal
and that you
as well.
translate it to your
Yes,
project.
exactly.
Yeah, you have to think about the person reading it and make it easy for them to see the connection between what the funder wants and what you're doing. So by using the same types of words, even maybe the same types of sections, it just makes it easier for us to see, okay, this fits.
And be
great.
somewhat repetitive. So don't be afraid of repeating certain components of your proposal, because it keeps reminding the reader as they're reading, I say the goal, I say the goal, I say the goal, I say the goal, I say the goal. Be specific and concrete. Give examples. Sometimes they don't understand the context even when you explain it. So provide examples of how they can internalize and envision what you're trying to explain. Show why you are the right person to do this. So explain your skills, your expertise, your network, your partnerships. This is all valuable information. Show that you have support locally. If you can show the funder that you have support from other partners and other creatives and other NGOs, they're going to be excited to fund your project. So if they notice that you're the only one that's interested to fund this project and that no one is supporting you, the community is not supporting you, the other organizations are not supporting you, you don't seem to have any in-kind contributions, they're going to be a bit sketchy to fund your project. Next.
Can I just, we skipped one,
Which one?
which maybe we haven't mentioned, but it's a bit obvious. Explain why you're doing something interesting. Why is it unique? Why is it an added value for the funds, or why is it an added value for Aruba? But really think about what is innovative, or what makes this project attractive.
Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about what I've seen as a bureau adviseur at the different funds that I have worked with and that I'm working at now. These are all things that we've already kind of heard tussen de regels door actually today, but I'm going to go through the list. Always sign up on time to get the password to go into the portal. I will be showing an example of this later in a bit, because it takes a day or two to get a password. Often funds nowadays want things digital, like Thais already said, but they need you to sign up to get a password to get into their portal, which is often called Mijn Fonds or Mijn Portaal, of algo di Mijn Kuboting Turbo Papel ng Ainang Kubo upload. Always make sure that you do this, maybe even at the beginning when you're like, yes, I want to apply for this call, apply for a password of the fund, because in the future, when you have another call you want to act upon, you can use the same password and it's the same domain. That is very important. Make it easier for yourself and call in and check in with the fund before you go in for the whole process. We already mentioned this. Every fund has a person who is in charge of the different funding regelingen or calls. The advisors will explain more precisely what the steps are. Also, what is important to mention, because I get a lot of calls with potentiële aanvragers in the position that I'm in, and the questions that they ask me range from, can you read this globally for me? Does it fit? And then I give them advice on how they need to tweak it, but it's still to the core of their message, but it also fits with the fund that I work with. And then they also learn how to write more precisely. And that's like one of the key questions, terms we've heard today, is to be very specific. And those are the types of questions that I get a lot. But you can also ask about budgeting. You can ask about the type of juridische entiteit. So do you need to be a stichting, or can you be an individual? Because some calls also give money to individual aanvragers. And sometimes even you don't need to be ingeschreven at the KVK. And those budgets range from different types of amounts. So always call and you can ask all of those questions. Try also to see it as building a relationship with the fund or the advisor. At the fund, the more comfortable you feel for yourself and take the energy to check in and ask questions, the more trust builds as well. Because it's also a learning curve for both parties. It's not just a learning curve for you, but it's also a learning curve for the fund. I was talking to someone in the pause when we were eating, And I got the question of what is specifically that importance. As a person who sits on the other side of the table when grants, application grants come in, I find it very important to also know how to advise the adviescommissie, like where Tibisay is in, to when they don't maybe see that zest or that essence completely in the written plan, I can say, but wait a minute, I talked to these people, and these are the elements that you can see here and here in the plan, but I can give extra context, so it needs to be in the plan, but I can give extra context. And I have had numerous occasions where the committee said, okay, then we will fund it.
Yes.
So it's very important.
This is key. That relationship can help, because you're in the committee and you have a question, and then the adviseur can say something, and you're like, oh, okay. So if the adviseur knows more about your project and you've spoken to them, this is such an important point, Gyonne.
And the
Really.
adviseur are the people who, you will see it when you get the presentation, the people we had at the beginning of the day on the slide under the names of the funds.
They are on your side. So
Yeah.
they will try to convince the board as, okay, this is a really good project, and they will be able to answer questions if you're not there to answer them.
Yeah,
So it's important to build that relationship with them, because the more they know you, the more eager they are to help you.
Yeah, their role is maybe not just like to make clear how it works. It's maybe not to convince the committee, but it is to give the information
Extra
that
context.
the committee needs.
Yes.
And if they have that information, they can do that. Yeah.
What I also had is be so bold and ask for the different optional avenues that a grant can be applied for. What I mean with this is that a lot of grants in the Netherlands, because again, that is my area of expertise, are looking into different forms of applying. Some of them have a combination of, let's say, a video message and a project. Others have a pitch and a project. Others have that you sit with the committee and you talk to them, and then they ask you to write something a little bit shorter than a whole project plan, and you can still get funded. So ask about the form, like a formanang, the ways you can apply, and if there are different avenues, because not everyone is always that savvy in writing either. And I think, in my opinion, funds are becoming more aware of that there is not always one standard form. And up until now, realistically, most of the time it's still written, but always ask for the different avenues and what is possible. Yeah. So what I see as well is that not all funding agencies, again, in my opinion, request the same information in the proposal. It's always important, what I mean with this is always important to have like the SMART goals, the doelen for yourself before you even apply to all of the funds. So write that down for yourself without a fund in mind yet. Just write that down, be clear to yourself all of the things we talked through today. I'm not gonna mention them again, but be specific for yourself, and then you can see that, for example, I'm going to use a very concrete example. One of the funds that I applied for one of my own projects as an artist or a maker is Mama Cash, and they fund really cool projects, but they had a call that only allowed me and my business partner to fill in a form instead of a whole project proposal. And it's good that I had the project proposal, but I didn't need all of that information to be handed in Mama Cash, and we still got funded. So that's what I mean. Always check in as well. And I had contact with the contactpersoon before we handed it in. So that is a tip from me in that sense. Like I said, you can apply as an individual and you can apply as a stichting nowadays. And applying for funds in general as an individual, I would say it's always good is what I call an accountability buddy. Someone who can read it with you or just checks in how far you are with the plan. Because most of the time it gets very overwhelming, even for someone like me who works with funds every day. But when I write my own proposals for my own things, I'm like, how do I know it, I feel it, but how, like, it's like that. And like people at funds are also humans in that sense. So that's why the relationship part is important, to build that trust, but also I know what it's like to be on the other side personally. So it's nice to have people that aren't maybe my collaboration partner in that project, but who know how to write and just check in with me.
Feedback, yeah.
Yeah,
To
and
give
give me
feedback.
feedback.
Feedback is very important, and we should not be afraid of feedback.
Like I said, or like everyone said today, when constructing a plan, be as specific as possible. Like we mentioned in the introduction, target your proposal, write out a detailed plan where you can use the information when applying to different funds. I would always advise to have, I'm stressing this because it's important to have a plan detailed as much as possible before you apply for any fund without the funds in mind, because then you stay true to your plan, and then you can see how you can maybe somewhat adapt different words or add different elements. Like you can ask for an education grant because you want to add an educational element to do workshops, ik zeg maar wat. But it's important to know what you want first, or your team wants. Always check the terms of conditions. I will show that in the next slide. Always ask for feedback after a rejection. You can always ask for feedback or advice during the process, like I already mentioned, but it's important to always ask for feedback after rejection, because not every fund, in my opinion, gives, or what I see, gives that a whole explanation either. Most of them do, but some of them don't, and you are always, I would advise always ask, because then you learn about what wasn't good for that call, or what wasn't clear in the plan for that fund.
And I also want to encourage our local creatives, just because you've been rejected doesn't mean your project is bad. Many times I see that that applicants lose the interest because they've been rejected. Don't take it personally. These people don't know who you are. They don't know if you have gray hair or pink hair, or they don't know anything about you. So it's not a personal attack. And I think this also has to do a lot with our culture and how we deal with feedback. Many times we as a people, we do not want to hear criticism or feedback, or we don't want to hear that we need to change or adapt. We are sometimes very stubborn in thinking and doing certain things in a specific way. But I think it's very important to consider that you are able to ask for feedback. None of these funds will tell you no. You are able to ask for feedback, and I would advise you to ask for feedback, because then you will learn what mistakes not to repeat. And maybe they are minor things that you did not even realize, like for example, not adding salaries to the budget. It's such a small thing, but it has a negative impact by not, in the sense that you will not receive the funding. So maybe you did your best and it was a perfect proposal, but just that one element was what you needed to get the funding. And then for the next time, you know, okay, la mi korla hinka salaries on their budget, and then you won't make that same mistake again.
The next one we kind of already mentioned is some calls are, I will give an example in the next slide. Sorry? Oh, yeah. First come, first serve. So sometimes they will give, like there's what I said, like 100,000 or 60,000 for this call, but that means that if that money is done before the deadline, that means you can't apply anymore. So always check that out. I will give a practical example of that in a bit. Was there a question?
Can you, okay, if you get rejected
That's
for
a
a
good question.
project, and you probably still have a month before it's closed, can you still reapply?
I think that's a good question that maybe differs per fund, to be honest, but what my experience is at Fonds Podiumkunsten, when I used to work with them, is specifically for one specific call, is that they saw that the people needed a lot more time to direct their plans or make it more concrete. And what they did do is that they gave them a second chance, but that budget was so big that they could give people in that same time frame that second chance to hand it in again. So, minuto durf die bisa kuna Tourfonds te Asina, but in my experience, that did happen with that specific call that I was.
And maybe
part
just
of.
to add on to that, maybe you are one stichting, you are able to apply to different calls at the same time.
Always advised to do that.
Yeah, so if there are 5 different calls open, you are able to apply with the same stichting in 5 different funds or 5 different calls in one fund. So you're not only limited to one. So our suggestion would be aplicar lo más cupor. So if there are 5 funds that link to your project, apply to 5 different calls, because mind you, the adviescommissie or the ones that are basically evaluating your own proposal, they're not the same group of people for each spore or each.
I would also say that you will get this information oftentimes if you do take contact at the beginning with the contact person, because they know what calls are open, which calls are the most applicable to your stichting or project, and then bonota gasta tempo in that sense either, because all calls have different terms of conditions, but then you know from the beginning, okay, these are the different calls that do apply to what we want to do. Yes.
This is a question kind of from online. I have an artist. He is looking basically to do a solo exposition, and we were discussing stipends. I don't know if you have any information about this. If this is different, how would that go?
You have, depending on what he's doing, I would think of a Mondrian Fonds or Fonds Podiumkunsten if you think about an explicit artist. But what I know about, let's say, Fonds Podiumkunsten is that they have so many different calls for productiebudget. They have calls even now during COVID that you can get yourself up and running again. They have calls on writing, for writing music or writing pieces of spoken word even. So you have different calls on how artists can pay themselves for the work that they do or the research part. So I don't know in what context this person. Then I would say that's a little bit more Mondrian. I don't know that much about Mondrian Fonds, their calls, but this is how it would work in Fonds with the Podiumkunsten, that's in that part. So always check the different calls. And what I do know, I can't say that about all the funds, but with Fonds Podiumkunsten, they have calls that are open for a longer period of time. So always check the deadline, like we said, but sometimes, that gives you a little bit more wiggle room to write out the thing as well. Bit more last minute, which is very stressful, so I don't advise that to anyone, but then you have a little bit more time. We also wanted to remind you, is that something that we also see, is that there is a gap in finding people, fondsenwervers, people who write out grants on, not even only on the island, but that is a big problem in my field of work in the Netherlands. And when I saw that connecting Aruba and or the ABC SSS and the Netherlands, it's the same problem. People think in the Netherlands ze zijn voor het oprapen, like they would say. It's not. There are so many people who in the Netherlands, this is maybe a tip that could be put in use in Aruba, is that people from institutions, cultural institutions in the Netherlands, like podia or whatever, any type of tentoonstellingsruimtes, the people there help individuals to write out the plans. So as an individual, if you know someone who works at a cultural institution here in Aruba or in the Netherlands and has time to write out those things or help you, sometimes they are open, or most of the time they are open if they have time as well individually to help you write it out.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely one of those kinds of services that Go Cultura is exploring to, or maybe to even train certain people to become fondsenwervers, or to train certain people to help with writing proposals. Rian?
Before you move on to the next slide, since you've been talking about the best practices, there's one little thing that I want to recommend to everybody. Most of the funds work with online forms. And when you get these online forms, fill in the questions. Because some people say like, look at project plan, see above, look at budget. That's not an answer to the questions we are asking. So if we're asking for a marketing plan, in that little box, fill in your answer. Do not refer to another document as an answer to the question. Yeah. Because a lot of it, when we discuss the projects, and we want to know the marketing plan, we don't want to have to be looking through all the documents, oh, where is the marketing plan? We have, the forms are in a specific format, a specific structure, in order for us to, okay, we want to discuss the marketing plan, there is the question, there is the answer. Yeah. And that's why it's important to really fill in the answers that we ask, and not like target group, turgende. You know, you really have to be specific, and that's why I love sometimes, but that's also, some of the boxes, as Tamara mentions, are specific to a maximum amount of words, because we're not there to read the Bible, we're there to read the project. So then you have to really be specific as possible. Yeah. So I'm really happy with the information you guys provided today, and this is a little extra that I kind of missed this morning.
And I think some of the Dutch funding agencies have the same system of having those boxes online, but almost all of them require you to upload the proposal separately. Yes. Because that's where this is the actual document proposal that you are handing in. So you have the check boxes and the specific boxes where you have to write 200 words, 100 words, 50 words. But then if you look at the attachments, or where you have to sla op a specific document, this is where you have to sla op your KVK, sla op your project documents, sla op your begroting, sla op all of these singular documentation that is attached to the format.
I wanted to give this example of a call that I think is not open anymore, but I had a lot of experience in. So when you go on the website of fondspodiumkunsten.nl, you see on the side, most of the websites have like this whole menu where you see the TAC subsidies, and then you can see all of the different regelingen calls that I was just talking about. Which is a lot. And this is only de regelingen voor maken en produceren. But you have programmering, internationalisering, meerjarige subsidies, etc., etc. I chose Programma Urban Projecten as an example to kind of put in practice when you go onto a website on everything we talked about today. So it gives you an example of what the call is, the Programma Urban Projecten. It says exactly wie komt in aanmerking, who can apply. Indien data, I think because it's closed, it doesn't say it, but it says it next to it, the deadline. It says exactly that you need to go to Mijn Fonds, what I was just talking about, where you need to get like a password for ruim op tijd to hand it in. Here it says naar Mijn Fonds om deze subsidie aan te vragen. It says the voorwaarden, you could say as well already. Wie komt in voor deze subsidie in aanmerking? And then you can see all of the different things that you need to embody to be able to ask for this fund. And that is actually something very simple, but it's very important to read these steps. Here you see as well what we were talking about, the beschikbare bedrag, so the maximum amount of money that is available for this specific call is 600,000 euros per year. So if that money is done within a year, sometimes it's 5 months, sometimes it's 6 months, this is a year, so it's pretty long. If it's done, then it's done. And they've had that in 2020 when I was still working with them. So many people asked, by the middle of the year, there was no money left. That money was done. So it's important to also keep updating, check out the website if you didn't hand it in yet and you're not in the process of applying.
Or talk to the contact person. Yes. Because if you have a relationship with them, they will let you know, don't bother applying because that call is finished. Or they will tell you, some new call opened, I'd rather you apply to that call.
There, yeah.
So this is why having a relationship with the contact person is very important.
Here you see as well, Frans Podiumkunsten really elaborated Er kan doorlopend subsidie worden aangevraagd totdat het budget op is. So you can keep asking for funds until it's finished. Not all funds say that. They just say this is the maximum and you have a year. And then they update when there is no budget left for this call. And they also give the other terms of condition. An artist can ask twice the subsidy for this call. So if you already asked it twice, then you can't ask for it anymore. So those things are very important, as well as I found very clear in this call, you can ask for it as an artist individually or as a stichting. Organisatie. So those things are very important to read because it's not like that for all calls.
And I think something to note when it comes to language, some of these websites, you can just click the English tab. So the
Yes.
Dutch funds are trying their best to be somewhat multilingual. They're trying. So some of these websites, you will find the English tab. So just click for the English tab if you feel uncomfortable with the Dutch.
Yes. And another thing, you see the regeling, the toelichting, all of the terms of conditions, you could say you can download from this specific call. And they also have, that's what I like about Fonds Podiumkunsten, they put under every call website layout that you can call if you're doubting or if you don't know what to do, then you can call them or you can always mail them. And this is a form that I wanted to show as well. Here you see as well for, you can choose Dutch or English. So this website has that. Mijn Fonds, which is the important portal that all actually funds in the Netherlands have. You can see that you can meld aan, so you can sign up as an individual or as an organization. You can change things there, and you can always call as well if you don't understand it, but this is the form and how that looks like to get your password so that they have all of the information there when they check out your grant. Yeah, I wanted to show this because visually it's a bit better than if we just talk about it. And it's the same one for the stichting, but always read well because like you see, this is for the individual. Something else that I wanted to share, which is a fund that is not for the ABC SSS, so don't look at that, but who has, in my opinion, one of the most best, I would say, tips for how to apply for a fund. It is in Dutch, so it's only for the people who speak Dutch, is if you go to vsbfonds.nl, so VSB Fonds, like it's written up there, just .nl, you go to the tab over VSB Fonds and then aanvragen. You get to this page where they give you all of those options. So tips for een aanvraagformulier. You have an online courses for getting a fund. And these tips are for not only for this specific fund, but I advise all of the people I work with or advise in my own time to check out this website so that they can get some tips on how to structure as well their proposal. And it will look something like this. They even have videos per segment, per segment, like the inleiding, the financing of your project, your case for support, why is it important, and the rechtsvorm, are you an individual or a stichting? All of those things and more you can find and listen to even, because he talks, you don't have to read it, in your free time. Yeah, because reading gets a bit
They think of everything.
Yeah.
You have no excuse.
So this is a very good website. So not to apply for funds, but for the tips of how to write a grant as well. Do we want to talk about
Yeah,
this?
this is the last part.
Yeah.
Rafi, since you're here.
Yeah. We wanted to elaborate a bit more on the verbindingsloket, but you're here.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Yes. Okay. Let me see all the information.
That was it.
No. I hope I have all the information, but okay, so thank you. I'm Rafi, I'm from the Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds. And indeed, the Rijkscultuurfondsen have lately been more open to extend their funds to also the Dutch Caribbean area. They are trying to understand that why this move that they're doing is not getting as many applications and that they thought they would get. That's why they started this pilot project. They asked us from Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds. By the way, we are a private fund. We are funded by, I think, a lottery in the funds in the Netherlands. But we are not reliant on government, and we are actually one of the smaller funds. However, I would want to encourage you to go to our site, www.pbccaribbean.com, and you will find your information. You can log in. It's very easy, but more on that later. You can go to our Facebook page where we have set up a link where you can register for Monday. It's going to be from 7 to 9, and you can then get more information, because what the ladies have so very eloquently and so expertly explained today is that the personal connection is very important, because we're all humans, and the exact thing that this project is trying to do is to have this verbindingsloket, which will hear your project, and then they will connect you directly to the fund that they think is the best suited for you. They're not going to just tell you to go and call them. They're going to connect you to a person there, which will help you further. So this is a real important opportunity for you to get to a real person that will hear you out, like the lady said, that can then help you to, get your project funded like it should. Oh yeah, because we have, like you see, we are open on Wednesdays, Fridays from Wednesday 9 to 11:30, Fridays from 2 to 6. Oh, that's the number, because the number is important. It's a 5999. It's a Curacao number, 686-6266. If you can, you can app them. And you can app call them, right? And these are the times you can see here. But I would want to ask you to visit the websites, like they said today. All of these funds, I was looking also at Mondrian funds. I'm looking at how easy it is to click on the things. And I want to also revert to what Mr. Edgen said today at the beginning, because every project requires time. If you want to achieve something, you have to put in the time. And time is life. So if you really commit, if you're thinking this is part of your life's work, you will put the time in to get to this goal. I want you to go on the websites, especially the Prins Bernhard Caribbean Culture Funds. You just put Prins Bernhard Caribbean on Google. You will find it. And actually, you can even register for an account today, because you can register, have an account, and when you have your idea, when you're ready, you just go use your login and then start writing. It's very easy. We're trying all our best to make it as easy as possible for you to reach your goals. The Prins Bernhard Culture Funds is not the biggest fund. We are not a Rijkscultuurfonds, but we are very enthusiastic. The people, I see several people who have had grants with us. We want you to succeed. Like we said earlier with Unoka, we will pre-approve. We will look at your project, give you a yes, and you can use that yes to keep building up your budget to reach your goals. Yeah.
We had to call to Curacao. Through Facebook, I needed to make an
Yes.
appointment first
Yes.
before I called that number.
Yes.
And when I called that number, I couldn't get those people.
Okay.
So I got frustrated.
So if you do not have Facebook, please call this number or app this number and say you want to register. They will get back to you.
But how about you in Aruba? Why can't we call you?
Sure.
Bisami, huh? Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my number is 593 593-3575. 593-3575, okay? Help me, I will help you with whatever I can.
But
Yes?
what I also want
But
to
also
say,
go to our Facebook.
what I also want to say is that I also have contact with, let's say, Dana Kibbelar, who's also in the list, and some of the other people. I applaud in that sense what Tibisay Caribe is doing, but also know, that's what Dana also told me, is that you can go through Tibisay Caribe because they will help you a bit more in the before process, but you can always already call or email them directly through the contact persons that I have in the list. So let's say you know, van Podiumkunsten, and you know like you have a theater piece you want to do. You don't per se have to go through him because you know you want to apply to van Podiumkunsten. You know that Dana is the contact person. She will email you back. So I would say also see it like that. So yeah.
I want to add to that to say that when I sat here, we always want to help, right? But we are a small fund. What I'm seeing today through this information, I can already see, and I want to thank Go Cultura and Agent so much for this very important day. I hope we can do this more often as well. Is that there's enough funds to fund these projects, and we always want to help, but it's the same. We have a year budget with us. Our budget is small. We will want to help you, but I think that we want to also make sure that you can get maybe sometimes the bigger help, which comes from the Rijksfondsen. But we will always want to help you to give you be a buddy or whatever that helps you to get to your project.
So I think that kind of support is needed, and we need to find a way as a community to also have people who do that as a job.
Yeah.
And Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds is also a small organization, so we need to think as well, how can we make sure that some people can help us and we can pay them to do that? So I think maybe that's something to think about.
I want to answer that about the password. Look, when you apply with us, we become partners and we help you. But I'm going to say it again. We are a small fund, right? And I think you all should think and also feel that you deserve to have a bigger project. And this is where you will get really big structural projects. We will help you. We do that. When you go to our site, you make your login, we will help you. We will be there for you. But our funds are small. These are bigger funds. So I really want you to take this seriously and give yourself the value to put this time into these organizations, because it's going to benefit the actual goal that you want to achieve.
And also time-wise, we wanted to go over to the Q&A.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Adjan, how are we doing the Q&A? Because people.
I'll be walking around with the microphone. I have a few questions that came from those who are online. You did mention in the beginning OCT. They just asked if you could just tell us what OCT stands for.
Overseas countries and territories. That is
right.
basically all of the islands that fall under the European Union. So Aruba is an example of an island that falls under the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is EU, so we are an OCT.
All right. Outra pergunta, sede tá overkoepelend ding is aqui também. Hopi funds tá kaibau di sede.
That is an example of social funds, so not specifically in the sector that we're discussing today. So you have an example, samenwerkende fondsen. Samenwerkende fondsen has an overkoepeling with SEDE. So if you're a social organization and you want to apply for a social project, then you go to samenwerkende fondsen. In that case, you have a look at of samenwerkende fondsen at SEDE on Aruba.
All right.
So that is more social projects.
Another question through Zoom session. Based on the experience of the presenters involved with the Rijkscultuurfondsen, do those funding organizations require at the end of your projects that you submit a small report on the impact of your project?
Not all of them. Some of
Okay.
them do, some of them don't. And it depends also which call. Some
Yeah.
of the calls have larger amounts of money and then they do require some kind of reporting back. Because I mean, receiving 20,000 euros is 40,000 florins, so it's a lot of money. But then you have smaller calls where they, or specifically when you are a ZZ payer, where they don't really require you to give information back how the project went. But
Yeah.
it depends on the fund.
Yeah,
Depends
but
on-
I would assume usually yes. There is some what they call verantwoording. You have to say what you did. You can assume that that will be the case.
Especially financially.
Especially financially, and they will want to see the press releases. If you have
Yeah.
an event, it's great to invite them
Yeah.
because they will be happy and they will share it as well.
Yeah.
They're also a platform.
Pictures, links to, for example, interviews or in the news. Some of them, I know some of them require that you give a overview of how you spend the money. So if to see if what you requested is what you used, if there's part of the funding that's left over. So I mean, there is definitely the case that you can expect to report back.
All right. Last question I got online. Remy por Canarant City Pregunta. You guys did cover this a bit. The writing, the grant writing, it can be done in a different language, in English, right?
It depends on the fund.
And
Some
on the
of the funds have forms in English where you can use an English form, and some of them still require Dutch. But this is something that is in.
We have Google Translate. So.
You have Google Translate, yes, not always effective or correct, but it's the safest option. But I do want to give some hope. I mean, most of the funds are aware of the language barrier that we experience. They are aware of it, but then remember, it's also a lot of work from their end to provide everything in a separate language. So be patient in that and also voice that with the funds. If you have contact with the contact person, tell them, reiterate to them, we need these applications in another language. Because the more you express that, the more they express that back to the funds.
All right. Questions in the room? Okay, Pancho.
Boa tarde, Turiende. My congratulations for the presentation. Just a remark. When you're talking about organization, one of the very important things is to have your financial reports, which mostly we don't have. I'm not talking about the individual. Yes, and many Dutch funds require a year report by an accountant, which is very expensive, but you have to be very honest, as was said, if you don't have that, but at least you should have a year report. As an organization, that is one of our weakest points on the island.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and this is something that I notice quite often, that many NGOs on the island are not up to date with their finances and don't publish a jaarverslag. And this is a weakness that we have on the island, but mind you that you have to communicate this as well to the contact person, that they are aware that maybe you don't have a yearly report or a jaarverslag, and explain that to them and be honest with them, because they do require you most of the time to upload a jaarverslag.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, in terms of the communication with the advisor, with the fund, sometimes a call will require a samenwerkingsovereenkomst, a kind of contract between the different partners. Sometimes that can be very hard to get because maybe the minister has to sign it, right? And you can't do it quickly. In that case, explain to the advisor, to the fund, why you don't have it and why the partnership is still valuable, it's still real, but maybe the person in charge is at a level in which it takes time. And giving that information can already save you a lot of trouble. And then the advisor can tell you, okay, we can work with this for now, but when the project starts, you do need that letter. So there are ways,
yeah.
there is some flexibility in this, as long as you communicate it.
And that is something that we know as a memorandum. So when you have a memorandum of understanding, that is basically a contract where you state, or an overview where you state that both parties or 4 parties or 5 parties are agreeing to work with each other for a specific project or cause. And that is usually a separate document that you have to upload to show that this partnership is going to happen. Not that you apply as a group of 5 and then when the implementation phase starts, then it's a group of 2, which can happen.
Okay, mi pergunta está full diferente aqui. As an individual, right, who maybe don't have a KVK or nothing, right? Maybe you have a song you want to produce as a solo artist, or you're a dancer and you want to go showcase dancing, or you're painting and you want to showcase your art, right? Is it possible for somebody like that to go out there also and get the funding as
Yes. In that sense, yeah, I think if you specifically think, like I was talking about Fonds Podiumkunsten, they have specific calls for individuals, even if they are in an organization that already has asked for money, but they want to go out and do an individual manifestation, like in the dance or anything in that sense that has to do with podium, like Podiumkunsten, you can ask for funding for that. I even think at Mondrian Funds you have a lot of calls nowadays as individual artists that you can ask for.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and that is what you need to ask, not all, some calls you don't even have to be ingeschreven as a ZZP'er yet.
No.
So you really need to ask that. Some of them ask for a KVK uittreksel, then you are an individual artist asking for a grant, but sometimes you're an individual artist starting, or you've always done it in an organization and you want to break free for that project on your own. You can ask with the advisor at the fund if you need to be ingeschreven as a ZZP'er, because sometimes you don't need that either, but you need to ask.
On the type of project you have. Because some projects you don't even, why are you going to have a KVK to write a book or something like that? So it depends. A lot of times you have to specify what the project is, because that's going to make the difference whether you need a stichting or it can be done privately or anything.
Thank you. The next question?
Yes, hello. Have you heard of Everything is Possible, of the funding? Everything is Possible?
I personally don't know that fund.
Ah, okay.
Also not.
No.
No? Okay.
But there are, and that's maybe a good point, there are many, many, many more funds than we've mentioned today. Many that we don't know about, we've never even heard of. So this is, you're not limited to this. This is just what we know, and what we know is trying to engage also with the ABC SSS Islands. But there is indeed much more.
Yes, buen dia. I have a question on the budget and sustainability, right? So we've been hearing a lot about making projects sustainable, recht van bestaan. Not only creating a project, I mean, if it's social or social artistic, that is preventive for kids and youngsters, but then the follow-up, de nazorg daarvan, ora ku fondo kaba. But can you, in our case, being a foundation, if we're talking sustainability, can we already, within the spectrum of the years that we have the Meriado Programma funded by different funds, obviously, can we already implement a sustainability plan to see if it works? Because in our experience, then other funds, the reply we got from specific funds would be, yeah, but it's not a non-profit. It is non-profit, but then you require us to still work towards sustainability, because after 3 years we have no funding anymore. And then to implement then the business aspect of the project would be late. Because already you condition the community that the project is non-profit, so nobody would then see or even want to put budget into something like that afterwards.
I don't have an answer directly, but I'm just thinking out loud. I think not for profit if you have an income. I think it's what you do with the income, right? I mean, you can sell
back.
tickets
Yeah.
and still be a non-for-profit. And I think if you put that very clearly in your budget and you show both sides of the balance sheet and explain how it works, this is just a thought. I'm not entirely sure, but I think then it's okay. It's okay to receive income for your NGO as well.
I mean, this is the direction that most NGOs are going towards, having some kind of social enterprise or having some kind of business model attached, because in the end, the profit that you make as an NGO is not personal profit. It goes back invested into the stichting. So it's not considered
Profit
gain.
actually, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
so you make profit, you sell tickets for an event, but then it goes back into the nonprofit. So it's not considered profit in that sense.
Can we then implement, I mean, like within the budget, that, because you make the budget and you have dekkingsplan that you put together, right? And then you have the summary. But then in the dekkingsplan, you always would, in our case, we always make sure that with the 10% unforeseen, for instance, there's always a little bit of profit. And I had a conversation with Melanie from Prince Bernhard Fund. She's like, yeah, maybe that should be like a SPAR budget. This is going towards the sustainability of. Is that something that would also assist with the
I think you would really have to ask each fund, because I could imagine some funding agencies would say this is not allowed, but others that would say yes, it's allowed. So,
and I think it's also the type of call that you apply for.
Okay.
And the type of, in that sense, fund, like talking from my own experience as a person that works at ZOZ, is that we fund a lot of starting organizations or individuals who have their organizations set up, but they're so, because that's the gap we also saw in the Netherlands. You have starting and you have pre-starting, and we're actually with the sort of the pre-starting people who have really good ideas, but have themes that about polarization, etc., that aren't always applicable to the other funds. And what we see is that they focus mostly on just getting themselves started. And I never got this question, so I think there's something very interesting to think about, because maybe it's not applicable to the context in the Netherlands. I cannot conclude that, obviously, but it's never something I heard. So like Thais said, in that sense, I'm just giving this to contextualize, because I've never heard it in the Netherlands where I see the grants. It's something to think about, but I think it's, again, something you need to really ask per call and per fund.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just to add, because we were talking about the budgets, don't be afraid to add in your budget a fee for an accountant, for example. Especially with the Dutch funds, that is totally normal. They do not expect you to know how to do everything. So there you can put that as well, and that will also help you with the reporting at the end.
Hi, I have a suggestion. If you have time, if you could make like a monthly Zoom with this group about this kind of questions for this startup.
Yeah, so this is
a suggestion. Monthly or bi-monthly when you have, because it's gonna, I believe in repetition is the best thing. Repeat. Question every time.
I definitely know that, and I hope that everyone has filled out the survey, because definitely the intention is to organize a more structural program of workshops, guidance, tutoring, coaching, advising. But if we don't know the need, we can't provide a demand, or we can't measure the demand. So that's why I want to ask you to write this or to fill in the survey, because from this feedback we will know how many people need more workshops, how many people need more coaching, how many people would be able to pay for a specific type of service when it comes to grant writing. The idea is this is a basics to grant writing. We do have in planning more specific workshops that tackle writing specifically, budgeting specifically, making smart goals specifically. So you can imagine a sequence of different workshops.
That's a different type of workshop. It's like a yoga thing. All right. That's it? Okay. Everybody, thank you very much. Hope danke po sua presença awe. Mi que pedir um aplauso para Thais, para Tibisay e para Gyonne. Paposo mes também. Hobi danki wat altijd presente. Thank you very much. Patures nanku tabata conosco via Zoom session também. Mas agradecendo bom, o time de Go Cultura que também ajuda a fazer isso aqui possível. Na New India Assurance, a Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds, na Euphoria Architectenbureau, também na Team Films, hope danki na turhene para isso aqui possível. Subway também para participar awe. Nes nanku quizás não adquirir um book de drama real, me te querer boso ting desse reis o contacto para sino boso portinha aqui. E sorry? Vou videoclip to sali awe, ok. Ok, nice. Anto nos está bisa boso rinang hope danki para boso presença biamas. Queda pendiente para o próximo workshop, nós mira que toca interesse tá hope halto para nos profundizar nos mesmas den arte aqui de grant writing e quizás outro tipo de workshop nang para nos continuar empower o sector, para continuar também trabalhar capacity building. Nós temos informação de mite querer de turende, dus nós lo vai continuar para compartilhar informação aqui nang. Pues Arturo, me não olvida nada. No? Ok. Un día más, hope danke por vuestra presencia. Anything, cualquier pregunta, cualquier idea, guarda, diz acerca nos, ahora me bisa nos, me quemen nos tour aquí nang. Y para nos por compartir conocimiento, expandir habilidad nang, desarrollar habilidad nang, nos stay para empower otro y de verdad para nos porta hope más eficiente y exitoso y hacernos idea nang y proyecto nang realidad. Dus un día más, hope danke turende. Feliz de Sabra e nos topa no próximo oportunidade. Thank you.